To our amazing viewers at Infidelity Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Empire of Dust. Derek Sloan stared at the blueprints spread across his desk, the same way he had for the past 25 years. At 53, his calloused hands told the story of a man who'd built an empire with raw determination and grit. Coastal Heights Construction had become one of the most respected names in Nevada, but lately, something had been eating away at the foundation of the life he'd created. "Mr. Sloan, your wife called again." His assistant Veronica hovered in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "She said to remind you about dinner tonight." Derek nodded without looking up. "Tell her I'll be there. Just finishing up the Henderson project proposal." The truth was, Derek had finished the proposal hours ago. He'd been finding more reasons to stay at the office lately. The Sloan household had changed, transformed into something cold and unfamiliar. When he finally arrived home, the sprawling desert mansion felt empty despite the luxury cars in the driveway. Marilyn's silver BMW, Preston's Audi, and Whitney's Range Rover, all paid for by his sweat and sacrifice. "You're late," Marilyn said as he walked through the door. Her voice had lost its warmth years ago, replaced with something that sounded like permanent disappointment. At 49, Marilyn Sloan maintained the polished appearance of old Vegas money, though she'd come from nothing, just like him. "Traffic," Derek lied. He kissed her cheek, noticing how she subtly pulled away. 20 years ago, she would have embraced him. 20 years ago, her eyes would have lit up when he walked through the door. Preston barely looked up from his phone when Derek entered the dining room. At 22, his son had Derek's build, but none of his work ethic. Full ride to UNLV, but more interested in parties than classes. Preston had been working at Coastal Heights for the past year, supposedly learning the business, though Derek rarely saw evidence of actual work. Whitney, their 19-year-old daughter, offered a half-hearted smile. She had always been closer to Derek than Preston was, but lately, even she had grown distant. "How was everyone's day?" Derek asked, trying to pierce the invisible wall between himself and his family. "Fine," Preston mumbled. "School was whatever," Whitney shrugged. Marilyn served dinner with mechanical precision. "I saw Nate today at the club. He said the Davidson project is ahead of schedule." Derek nodded. Nathaniel Lawson had been his project manager for 5 years. Good at his job, popular with clients and the crew. Younger than Derek by almost a decade, with the kind of easy charisma Derek had never possessed. "That's good to hear," Derek said, though something about Marilyn's casual mention of Nate bothered him. It wasn't the first time his wife had mentioned running into his project manager at the club. After dinner, Derek retreated to his study. Through the window, he could see Preston leaving in his Audi, probably heading to another party. Whitney disappeared to her room, and Marilyn claimed she had a headache and went to bed early. Derek opened his laptop and checked the GPS tracker app he'd installed weeks ago, something he'd never imagined doing in all his years of marriage. Marilyn's BMW was moving, heading away from their neighborhood, despite her supposed headache. His stomach clenched as he watched the blue dot travel across the screen, eventually stopping at an address he recognized as Nate Lawson's condo complex. His suspicions weren't new. Small things had been adding up for months. Marilyn's sudden interest in fitness, new clothes, mysterious appointments, and the growing coldness between them. What hurt more was how Preston and Whitney had been changing too. Secretive, avoiding him, almost contemptuous. Derek closed the laptop and poured himself a whiskey. He didn't break things or rage. That wasn't his style. Derek Sloan had built an empire by being calculating, patient, and thorough. If his family was betraying him, he would confirm it beyond any doubt. Then, and only then, would he decide how to respond. Little did they know, Derek Sloan never forgave betrayal. That was the one rule he had lived by since growing up in the foster system, where loyalty was the only currency that mattered. As he sipped his whiskey, he began to formulate a plan, not for reconciliation, but for something much colder. Chapter 2, Paper Trails. Derek didn't confront Marilyn about her late-night visit to Nate's condo. Instead, he began building his case methodically over the next 2 weeks. He hired Rudy Tanner, a discreet private investigator recommended by his attorney, Leo Donahue. "I need everything," Derek told Rudy during their first meeting at a diner far from Derek's usual haunts. "Every text, every call, every meeting. I want to know how long, and I want to know who else knows." Rudy, a weathered ex-cop with tired eyes, nodded. "I've handled hundreds of these cases, Mr. Sloan. It usually goes one of two ways. Either you're wrong, and we can all breathe easier, or you're right, and it's worse than you thought." "I'm right," Derek said flatly. "Just give me proof." At the office, Derek maintained his routine while keeping a closer eye on Nate. The younger man seemed unchanged, confident, friendly, completely at ease. It made Derek's blood boil how Nate could look him in the eye every day, discuss projects, even joke about weekend plans while sleeping with his wife. Derek also began documenting his own finances with meticulous precision. Coastal Heights construction was his life's work, and he'd made sure the business was ironclad in his name alone, despite Marilyn's occasional suggestions over the years that she should have some ownership stake for tax purposes. After a week, Rudy delivered his first report. Photos of Marilyn and Nate at restaurants, holding hands across tables, kissing in his car. Text message transcripts with explicit content that made Derek's jaw clench. But what truly gutted him was an audio recording from Nate's condo. "The kids are on board." Marilyn's voice came through clearly. "Preston was easy. He's always resented Derek's pressure. Whitney was harder, but she came around when I explained how much better everything would be with you instead. We just need to be patient," Nate replied. "The timing has to be right." Leo said the prenup makes things complicated unless we can prove certain things. Derek's blood ran cold. Leo, his attorney of 15 years, Leo Donahue, was apparently advising his wife and her lover. That evening, when Derek returned home, he watched his family with new eyes. Preston was home for once, laughing with Whitney in the kitchen. They fell silent when he entered. "Hey, Dad," Whitney said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "How was work?" "Enlightening," Derek replied, searching his daughter's face for any sign of remorse or discomfort. There was none. Later, as Marilyn prepared for bed, she mentioned casually, "Preston wants to talk about taking on more responsibility at the company. I think it would be good for him." Derek nodded. "We'll see." As his family slept, Derek sat in his study reviewing Rudy's documents. The betrayal ran deeper than he'd imagined. Not just an affair, but a conspiracy to push him out of his own life. Texts between Preston and Nate revealed the younger man had been positioning himself as a mentor to Derek's son, filling his head with ideas about how outdated Derek's business methods were. Even more disturbing were the financial documents Rudy had uncovered. Small amounts had been siphoned from company accounts over the past 6 months. Not enough to notice immediately, but substantial in total. The money had gone into an LLC registered to Preston, with Marilyn and Nate as silent partners. The picture became crystal clear. His wife wanted him gone. His children wanted him gone. His project manager wanted his company and his life, and even his attorney was working against him. Derek didn't sleep that night. Instead, he began making calls to contacts he hadn't spoken to in years. People from before he was successful. People who understood that sometimes justice required getting your hands dirty. Chapter 3. The Family Meeting. 3 days later, Derek arrived home to find Preston's, Whitney's, and Marilyn's cars all in the driveway. Unusual for a Thursday evening. When he entered, they were seated in the living room, faces solemn. "Dad, we need to talk," Preston said, standing as Derek entered. "We're having a family meeting." Derek set down his briefcase, his face betraying nothing of what he knew. "What's this about?" Marilyn sat rigid on the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Derek, we've been trying to find the right way to say this for months." "Say what?" Derek took a seat, noting how they had positioned themselves across from him, a united front. Whitney looked uncomfortable but determined. "Dad, things haven't been working for a long time. You're never really here, even when you're physically present. You care more about the company than us." Preston nodded, emboldened by his sister's words. "You've built this idea of a perfect family in your head, but it's all about control for you. You've never actually seen any of us for who we are." Derek absorbed the accusations silently, watching the rehearsed performance unfold. "We want you out by Friday," Preston finally said, his voice gaining confidence. "We think it's best if we have some space. Permanent space." "I understand," Derek replied, his calm response clearly throwing them off balance. They'd expected anger, arguments, perhaps even tears. "You understand?" Marilyn's voice held a note of suspicion. "Yes," Derek nodded. "I understand completely." After an awkward silence, Whitney spoke up. "So you'll leave?" "I said I understand," Derek repeated, standing up. "If you'll excuse me, I need to make a call." He walked to his study and closed the door, leaving them bewildered in the living room. He could hear their hushed, confused voices through the door. They had expected a fight. They had wanted a fight, something they could use against them later. Derek picked up his phone and called the only number that mattered now. "Leo, it's Derek Sloan. We need to talk about my family situation. Tomorrow, first thing." When he emerged from his study 30 minutes later, the family meeting had dispersed. Marilyn approached him cautiously in the hallway. "Derek, I know this is difficult, but it's for the best. We've grown apart in—" "Save it," Derek said quietly. "I'll be out by Friday." Just like Preston asked, Marilyn looked taken aback by his easy acquiescence. "Where will you go?" "Don't worry about me," Derek replied, his voice unervingly calm. "I'll take care of myself. I always have." That night, Derek packed a single suitcase with essentials. He transferred key documents to his briefcase and removed family photos from their frames, placing them in a folder. As he worked, Whitney appeared in the doorway of the master bedroom. "Dad!" Her voice was smaller now, less certain than during the family meeting. "Yes." Derek continued packing without looking up. "I just wanted to say." She hesitated. "I just want you to know it's not personal." Derek finally looked at his daughter, seeing not the little girl who once adored him, but a young woman who'd made her choice. "Everything is personal, Whitney. That's the one thing I try to teach you and your brother. Every choice has consequences." Whitney shifted uncomfortably. "Mom says you'll be fine, that you always land on your feet." "Your mother's right about that," Derek nodded. "I will be fine." As Thursday turned to Friday, Derek made one final sweep of the house he'd built. In the kitchen, he left his house keys and the key fob for his Mercedes, the only vehicle registered in both his and Marilyn's names. "Goodbye," he said to the empty house. Before dawn, Derek Sloan drove away in a rental car, leaving behind the family that had betrayed him. But unlike what they believed, he wasn't admitting defeat. He was simply repositioning for the battle to come. Chapter 4: Foundations of Vengeance. Derek checked into the Westin under a different name, using cash. The suite offered a view of the Las Vegas Strip, glittering against the dawn sky. He'd already prepared this location a week earlier, installing secure lines and setting up what would become his war room. At precisely 8 a.m., a knock came at the door. Leo Donahue stood there, looking every bit the polished attorney in his tailored suit and affected smile. "Derek, I came as soon as I could. This is all very sudden." Derek gestured him inside. "Thank you for making the time, Leo. 20 years of friendship counts for something, right?" Leo's smile faltered slightly. "Of course. Now, you mentioned family issues on the phone." "Sit down," Derek said, pouring 2 glasses of water. "I had an interesting family meeting last night. My wife and children have asked me to leave my home." Leo adopted a sympathetic expression. "I'm sorry to hear that, Derek. These things can be complicated." "Cut the bullshit," Derek interrupted, his voice still calm. "I know you've been advising Marilyn and Nate Lawson about how to break my prenup. I know about the meetings, the consultations, all of it." Leo's face drained of color. "Derek, I don't know what you think you know." Derek slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos of Leo meeting with Marilyn and Nate at a restaurant outside of town, along with transcripts of phone calls. 20 years, Leo. 20 years, I trusted you with everything." Derek's voice remained measured, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to continue representing me, publicly. You're going to tell Marilyn and Nate that everything is proceeding as they hoped. And you're going to report every conversation back to me. That's a conflict of interest, Derek. I can't. You created the conflict when you betrayed me." Derek leaned forward. "And you can and will do exactly what I'm asking. unless you want the Bar Association to receive evidence of how you've been double-billing clients for years. Or maybe the IRS would be interested in those offshore accounts you think no one knows about. Leo swallowed hard. You wouldn't. I protect what's mine, Leo. Always have. The question is whether you're smart enough to get on the right side of this now, or if you want to go down with them. After Leo left, visibly shaken, Derek made his next move. He called Rudy Tanner for an update and then reached out to Sylvia Keller, an aggressive attorney from a rival firm who had tried to poach him as a client for years. I need a shadow counsel, he explained to Sylvia. Someone who can prepare everything without actually filing until I give the word. By noon, Derek had established his new command center. On the wall, he created a mapping of everyone involved in the conspiracy against him. Marilyn and Nate at the center, Preston and Whitney as willing accomplices, Leo as their legal advisor. But there were still pieces missing. Derek's phone rang. It was Boomer Walsh, an old friend from his construction days before he'd started his own company. Boomer had gone into private security after an accident left him with a permanent limp. Found your guy, Boomer said without preamble. Former tech specialist from the NSA, goes by Mouse. Not cheap, but he can get into anything with an IP address. Set up, Derek replied. Today, by nightfall, Mouse, a wiry man with thick glasses and constantly moving hands, had established surveillance on all of Marilyn's and the children's devices. Derek watched impassively as Mouse demonstrated how he could access text messages, emails, and even activate microphones remotely. What about the company's systems? Derek asked. Already mapped. Mouse replied, bringing up diagrams on his laptop. Found several unauthorized access points and evidence of data being copied. Someone's been very busy in your financial records. Nate Lawson, Derek said flatly. Likely. The access comes from his company credentials, but routed through proxies. Amateur attempts to cover tracks. Derek nodded. Keep monitoring. I want to know every move they make. That night, as Derek reviewed the growing evidence of betrayal, he received a text from Leo. Meeting with M and in tomorrow. They're filing Monday. Perfect timing, Derek thought. The weekend would give him exactly what he needed to set everything in motion. On Saturday morning, Derek made two crucial visits. First to Ray Domingo, a former client whose real estate development had been saved by Derek when other contractors walked away. Ray had connections throughout the Vegas business community, both legitimate and otherwise. I need leverage on Nathaniel Lawson, Derek explained in Ray's opulent office. Ray nodded slowly. The project manager who's been seen around town with your wife? Consider it done. Derek's second visit was to Coastal Heights Construction. Using his master keys, he entered when the weekend skeleton crew was on lunch break. In his office, he accessed the safe behind the bookshelf, removing original documents that never should leave the premises, incorporation papers, land deeds, and client contracts with handwritten addendums. As he was leaving, Derek encountered Veronica, his loyal assistant who had come in to catch up on work. Mr. Sloan, she said surprised. I thought you were taking personal time. I am, Derek replied, but I needed to retrieve some things. Veronica hesitated. Sir, Mr. Lawson came by yesterday with Mrs. Sloan. They were in your office for quite some time. Derek's expression didn't change. Thank you for telling me, Veronica. Actually, there's something I need your help with. By Sunday, Derek had set the foundation for his counterattack. Mouse had compiled a comprehensive dossier on Nate Lawson's activities, revealing a pattern of seducing wealthy married women, always targeting families with business interests he could exploit. Marilyn wasn't his first or even his most lucrative target. More disturbing were the conversations Mouse had intercepted between Nate and Preston. The older man had been grooming Derek's son for months, positioning himself as the father figure Preston supposedly needed. Together, they had been identifying Coastal Heights' most valuable assets and clients, planning how to retain them after Derek was pushed out. They're planning to force a sale of your company, Sylvia explained after reviewing the evidence. With Marilyn getting half in the divorce, and Preston as your son having apparent legitimate interest, they think they can pressure you to sell your remaining share rather than work with them. Derek smiled coldly. They've miscalculated. When Monday dawned, Derek was ready. Let them file their papers. His response would come when they least expected it, and from directions they'd never anticipated. Chapter 5: The Spider's Web. By Wednesday, the initial shock waves had hit. Marilyn had filed for divorce, citing irretrievable breakdown and emotional abandonment. Leo, playing his assigned double role perfectly, had publicly taken Derek's case while privately feeding information to Derek about Marilyn and Nate's strategies. Derek maintained his base at the Westin, expanding his operation to a second suite where Boomer and Mouse established 24/7 surveillance. The evidence continued to mount. Nate had already moved some personal items into the Sloan residence. Preston was telling colleagues at Coastal Heights that changes in management were coming. Whitney had withdrawn from her spring semester at college, citing family transition as the reason. "They're awfully confident," Rudy observed, reviewing surveillance photos of Marilyn and Nate shopping for furniture together. "Almost like they think this is already over." "That's because they don't understand what they're actually fighting for," Derek replied. "They think this is about assets, about money. It's not. It's about consequences." On Thursday, exactly 1 week after the family meeting, Derek initiated Phase 2. First, he had Sylvia file a countersuit to Marilyn's divorce petition, including explosive allegations of conspiracy, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. The filing itself wasn't meant to succeed, merely to distract and unbalance. While Marilyn and Leo were engaged in emergency meetings about the countersuit, Derek made his first public move at Coastal Heights. He called an emergency board meeting, where he revealed selective evidence of Nate's attempts to undermine the company. Effective immediately, Nathaniel Lawson is terminated from Coastal Heights Construction, Derek announced to the shocked board members. Security has already removed his access to all company properties and systems. Preston, who sat on the board in a junior role, turned pale. "Dad, you can't just..." Additionally, Derek continued as if Preston hadn't spoken. "All employee access is temporarily restricted pending a full security audit. New authentication protocols are being implemented as we speak." The board members, mostly longtime associates who owed their wealth to Derek's success, nodded in agreement despite their confusion. Only Preston tried to object, but he was quickly silenced by the chairman's support of Derek's decisions. After the meeting, Preston confronted his father in the hallway. "What the hell are you doing? You can't just fire Nate without cause." Derek looked at his son calmly. "I have more cause than you know, Preston. And unlike you, I have the authority to protect what I built." "Mom was right about you," Preston spat. "You only care about control." "No," Derek replied. "I care about loyalty. Something you should have learned before conspiring with your mother's lover to steal my company." Preston's face revealed everything Derek needed to know. That's not what happened," he stammered. "Go home, Preston," Derek said, "while you still have one." That evening, Ray Domingo delivered the promised information on Nate Lawson. The file revealed that Nate had served time for fraud in his 20s, a fact he'd managed to keep hidden with a sealed record and a changed middle name. More damning were records of 3 previous relationships with married women, all of whom had divorced successful husbands after Nate entered their lives. In 2 cases, he had ended up with executive positions in the ex-husband's companies. "He's a professional con man," Ray explained. "High-functioning sociopath, according to the prison psychologist report. Targets wealthy families with existing tensions, exploits the weaknesses." Derek nodded. "Has he ever been violent?" "Not directly," Ray said. "He's too smart for that. Manipulates others to do the dirty work while keeping his hands clean." Derek added the information to his war room wall. The picture was becoming clearer. Nate had identified the Sloan family as a target, seduced Marilyn, and then systematically turned the children against their father. His end goal wasn't just Marilyn or even a position at Coastal Heights. It was complete replacement of Derek in every aspect of his life. On Friday morning, Derek received an unexpected visitor at the Westin. Whitney stood outside his suite, looking less confident than during the family meeting. "How did you find me?" Derek asked, letting her in. "It wasn't hard," Whitney replied. "You're still using your American Express for the room." Derek nodded, making a mental note to address that oversight. "What do you want, Whitney?" "Things are weird at home," she said, pacing the suite. "Mom and Nate are acting like everything's fine, but Preston came home furious yesterday. He said you accused him of trying to steal the company. I stated facts, Derek corrected. The same facts I'll state in court if necessary. Whitney looked troubled. Dad, this isn't what was supposed to happen. Mom said you were unhappy, that you'd be better off without the pressure of the family, that you'd be relieved. Derek studied his daughter carefully. Did you really believe that, Whitney? Or was it just easier than admitting what you were actually doing? I don't know anymore, she admitted, tears forming. Nate keeps saying everything will calm down once the initial shock passes, but it doesn't feel right. For a moment, Derek felt the pull of paternal instinct, the desire to comfort his daughter, to forgive. But then he remembered the recordings, the way she had participated in the conspiracy for months. Her tears now came only after seeing consequences begin. You made your choice at the family meeting, Derek said evenly. I suggest you prepare for what comes next. What does that mean? Whitney asked, wiping her eyes. It means actions have consequences, Derek replied. Now, I have work to do. After Whitney left, Derek called Mouse. I need to know everywhere she goes, everyone she talks to. She might be having second thoughts, or this could be their attempt to gather intelligence. By the end of the week, Derek had a comprehensive understanding of the conspiracy against him. Nate had orchestrated everything, using Marilyn's dissatisfaction and the children's resentments as weapons. The plan had been to push Derek out emotionally and then legally, enabling them to take control of Coastal Heights through a combination of Marilyn's divorce settlement and Preston's position. What they hadn't counted on was Derek's lifetime of preparing for betrayal. Every major asset was protected through complex legal structures. The company's most valuable contracts contained clauses that Derek had personally negotiated, many contingent on his direct involvement. And most importantly, Derek had spent decades building relationships with people who owed him favors, people who now formed a network of allies against his family's betrayal. On Sunday night, 10 days after the family meeting, Derek received confirmation that all preparations were complete. Tomorrow would begin the true reckoning. Are you sure you want to go this far? Sylvia asked during their final review. Once we start, there's no going back. Derek looked at the evidence wall, at the photos of his family plotting against him, at the transcripts of their contemptuous words. They didn't give me a choice. They thought they could take everything I built and discard me without consequences. They need to understand why that was a mistake. Chapter 6. Checkmate Preparations. On Monday morning, exactly 11 days after the family meeting, Derek Sloan walked into Coastal Heights Construction dressed impeccably in his best suit. Employees stared as he made his way through the building. Many had heard rumors of his family troubles, and his absence the previous week had fueled speculation. Good morning, he said calmly to the receptionist. Please inform all department heads that there will be a company-wide meeting at 10 a.m. In his office, Derek found evidence of disturbance, subtle shifts in how things were arranged, files that had been moved and imperfectly replaced. Veronica confirmed his suspicions. Mr. Preston has been using your office almost daily, she said. And Mr. Lawson was here again on Friday, despite having been terminated. Thank you, Veronica. Your loyalty won't be forgotten. At 10 a.m., Derek stood before his assembled employees in the company's large conference room. Preston arrived late, slipping in at the back with a defined expression. I want to address the rumors directly, Derek began. Yes, my wife has filed for divorce. Yes, there are family issues being resolved. But make no mistake, Coastal Heights Construction remains under my full control and direction. He paused, letting his gaze sweep the room. Some individuals have attempted to create confusion about the company's future. Let me be absolutely clear. There will be no change in ownership or senior management. Anyone who has been told otherwise has been misled. Derek then revealed charts showing the company's performance and projections. We have secured 3 major new contracts in the past week. Our financial position is stronger than ever. Preston shifted uncomfortably at the back of the room as Derek continued. Finally, effective immediately, all employees will be required to revalidate their security credentials. Any attempt to access company data through unauthorized channels will result in immediate termination and potential legal action. After the meeting, Derek summoned Preston to his office. When his son entered, Derek was reviewing documents at his desk. "You're bluffing," Preston said without preamble. "Mom gets half of everything in the divorce. That includes the company." Derek looked up calmly. "Is that what Nate told you? That your mother automatically gets half of Coastal Heights?" "That's how it works," Preston insisted, though less confidently. "Sit down," Derek ordered. When Preston reluctantly complied, Derek continued. "Coastal Heights Construction is owned by the Sloan Family Trust, which I established before marrying your mother. The trust has specific succession provisions that cannot be altered during a divorce proceeding. This was only partially true, a calculated deception to unsettle Preston." "That can't be legal," Preston objected. "Your boyfriend Nate isn't the legal expert he pretends to be," Derek replied. "Did he also tell you about his fraud conviction? Or about the other families he's infiltrated?" Preston's expression confirmed he knew nothing about Nate's history. "You've been played, son. The question is whether you're smart enough to recognize it before it's too late." As Preston left, visibly shaken, Derek made another call to Ray Domingo. "It's time for Phase 3. Activate everything." That afternoon, Derek had Sylvia file amended divorce counterclaims with new evidence attached. Photos of Nate with his previous targets, bank records showing suspicious transfers, and affidavits from former business associates of the other men Nate had ruined. The filings weren't sealed, ensuring the information would quickly become public. Simultaneously, Boomer's team executed a more direct approach. Using the evidence of Nate's past fraud, they contacted his parole officer from his earlier conviction. Though the terms had technically ended years ago, the revelation of potential new fraudulent activity was enough to trigger an official review. By evening, Nate received an unwelcome visit from law enforcement at the Sloan residence. Though they didn't arrest him, the officer's presence and questions about his finances created exactly the spectacle Derek had intended in the affluent neighborhood. Meanwhile, Mouse implemented the digital side of Derek's plan. Every device belonging to Marilyn, Nate, Preston, and Whitney received the same message simultaneously. A simple image of a chessboard with the king in checkmate, accompanied by the text, "Betrayal has consequences." When Marilyn called Leo in a panic, the attorney followed his script perfectly. "I don't know what Derek is doing, but the new filings are devastating, Marilyn. There are fraud allegations, conspiracy claims. This is much worse than we anticipated." That night, Derek received a furious call from Marilyn. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Police came to our home because of your lies." "Not lies, Marilyn. Evidence. There's a difference." "You tried to intimidate me," she hissed. "It won't work. I know my rights." "Do you also know who you've invited into your bed?" Derek asked calmly. "Do you know about the other wives, the other businesses? Did you know you're just the latest in a pattern for him?" Her momentary silence told him she hadn't known. "This can still end cleanly," Derek offered, following his script. "Sign the revised settlement agreement Leo will deliver tomorrow. Walk away with the house and a fair financial package. Or fight me and end up with nothing." "You're bluffing," Marilyn said, echoing Preston's words from earlier. "You can't erase 20 years of marriage." "You did that the moment you conspired with Nate," Derek replied. "Don't confuse my previous generosity with weakness." After hanging up, Derek reviewed the final preparations with his team. Bank accounts had been secured, digital evidence backed up in multiple locations, loyal employees positioned in key roles throughout Coastal Heights. Everything was in place for the final act. "What about your kids?" Rudy asked. "Are you sure you want to go through with this part?" Derek looked at the family photos he'd brought from the house, now pinned to the war room wall. They made their choice. Now they'll live with it. Tuesday dawned with Derek feeling a cold sense of calm. After 2 weeks of preparation, today would bring the culmination of his response to betrayal. He dressed carefully in his most intimidating suit and headed to the courthouse where Marilyn's divorce petition would have its first hearing. The trap was set. All the pieces were in position. Now it was time to spring the deadfall on those who had thought they could discard him so easily. Chapter 7. The Trap Springs. The courtroom was tense as Derek took his seat at the respondent's table with Sylvia beside him, not Leo. Marilyn's eyes widened at the substitution of counsel. Nate sat directly behind her, whispering urgently in her ear. Preston and Whitney occupied seats in the row behind them, both looking uncomfortable. Judge Eleanor Briggs entered, a no-nonsense veteran of the family court system known for her sharp insights and low tolerance for games. Derek had not chosen this judge by accident. Sylvia had maneuvered skillfully to ensure Judge Briggs would hear the case. "We have several motions before us today," Judge Briggs began, reviewing the files. Quite an unusual number for an initial hearing. She looked up, eyes narrowing, and quite unusual allegations. "Ms. Keller, you're representing Mr. Sloan today?" Sylvia stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Donahue has recused himself due to conflict of interest." Leo, seated at the back of the courtroom, shifted uncomfortably. Marilyn's attorney, Thomas Wilson, appeared confused by this development, but proceeded with his arguments for temporary support and exclusive use of the marital residence. When it was Sylvia's turn to respond, she dropped the first bombshell. "Your Honor, we have evidence that this divorce action is part of a larger conspiracy to defraud Mr. Sloan of his business assets." She submitted a thick binder of documents. "These materials demonstrate that Mrs. Sloan, her paramour Mr. Lawson, and unfortunately even the Sloan children have engaged in a coordinated effort to strip Mr. Sloan of his company and assets." The judge reviewed the materials with a deepening frown while Marilyn whispered frantically with her attorney. Nate maintained a calm facade, though Derek noticed his leg bouncing nervously under the table. "These are serious allegations," Judge Briggs said finally. "Mr. Wilson, did you review these documents before today?" "We've had no opportunity, Your Honor," Wilson protested. "This is the first we're seeing these claims." "Then perhaps you should take time to review them now," the judge suggested, calling a 30-minute recess. As they filed out, Marilyn approached Derek in the hallway. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "You're embarrassing all of us with these ridiculous accusations." "Not accusations," Derek corrected quietly. "Evidence. And this is just the beginning." When court resumed, Wilson attempted to dismiss Derek's claims as retaliatory fabrications, but the judge remained focused on the documentation. "Your Honor," Sylvia continued, "we have additional evidence that Mr. Lawson, who appears to be more than merely Mrs. Sloan's romantic interest, has a criminal record for similar schemes targeting wealthy families. We've included court records from Arizona and California." Nate visibly paled as his past was exposed. Marilyn turned to look at him with new uncertainty in her eyes. The hearing concluded with Judge Briggs issuing temporary orders that heavily favored Derek. No provisional support for Marilyn, continued joint access to the marital residence for Derek, and a freeze on all business assets pending further review. Additionally, the judge added, "I'm ordering forensic accounting of all accounts associated with the parties, including any business interests. No assets are to be transferred or dissipated while this matter is pending." Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, tipped off anonymously about the salacious details of the case involving one of Las Vegas's successful businessmen. Derek walked past them without comment while Marilyn, Nate, and the children were bombarded with questions about fraud allegations and criminal history. Phase 1 the courtroom strategy had worked perfectly, but Derek was just getting started. That afternoon, he returned to Coastal Heights for Phase 2. Security guards, new ones hired through Boomer's connections, were stationed at every entrance. When Preston arrived after the hearing, his access badge was denied. "What is this?" Preston demanded at the front desk. The security guard called Derek, who came to the lobby. "Your access has been suspended pending the investigation," Derek explained calmly. "You can't keep me out of the company," Preston shouted, causing heads to turn throughout the lobby. "I'm not keeping you out of the company," Derek clarified. "I'm keeping you away from sensitive information while you're actively involved in a conspiracy against the company's interests." The board voted unanimously this morning. Preston's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This isn't over." "You're right about that," Derek agreed. When Preston returned home, he found Coastal Heights vehicles parked outside. Inside, a team was removing all company property, laptops, files, even Preston's company car keys. "What are they doing?" Whitney asked, watching in shock as the team efficiently cleared out Preston's home office. "Company property recovery," the team leader explained, showing a court order signed by Judge Briggs. Standard procedure for suspended employees under investigation. Similar teams arrived simultaneously at Nate's condo and the Sloan residence. Marilyn called Derek in a fury. "They're taking everything. My laptop, my phone. They say they're company property, but they're my personal devices." "Check your employment contract with the Sloan Family Foundation," Derek replied calmly. "All electronic devices provided to family members remain company property. It's paragraph 7, I believe." The digital devices were delivered directly to Mouse, who began immediate forensic analysis to extract additional evidence. By evening, they had recovered deleted messages and files that further documented the conspiracy. The real masterstroke came the next morning. Local business publications and the Las Vegas Sun ran front-page stories about the divorce case and fraud allegations. Derek had never spoken to the press, but the court filings were public record, and an anonymous source had provided reporters with key documents highlighting Nate's criminal history and pattern of targeting wealthy families. Coastal Heights clients began calling, concerned about the company's stability. Derek personally reassured each one, projecting calm confidence, while subtly highlighting how Preston and Nate had attempted to approach them about future business outside proper channels. Many clients expressed outrage at these unauthorized contacts, further strengthening Derek's position. By Wednesday afternoon, cracks had formed in the conspiracy. Whitney called Derek, her voice breaking. "Dad, it's all falling apart. Mom and Nate are fighting constantly. Preston's drinking and saying we made a huge mistake. I don't know what to do." "You should have thought about that before you participated in trying to destroy me," Derek replied, unmoved by her tears. "Actions have consequences, Whitney." That evening, Leo Donahue delivered the final piece of intelligence. Marilyn had consulted another attorney about separating her case from Nate's growing legal problems. "She's trying to salvage what she can," Leo explained. "The new evidence has her terrified about criminal liability." Derek nodded. "Perfect. Now we move to Endgame." Chapter 8. Scorched Earth. On Thursday morning, exactly 2 weeks after the family meeting, Derek implemented the Endgame strategy. First, Sylvia filed amended pleadings with the new evidence recovered from the digital devices, including damning text exchanges where Marilyn and Nate explicitly discussed their plan to get Derek out and take everything. Simultaneously, Derek's contacts in the district attorney's office received comprehensive documentation of financial irregularities involving Nate, Preston, and the funds they had diverted from Coastal Heights through the Shell LLC. At Coastal Heights, Derek called an emergency board meeting where he presented incontrovertible evidence of Preston's attempts to divert clients and misrepresent his authority within the company. "The board has no choice but to formally terminate Preston Sloan's employment and remove him from his board position," Derek concluded. The vote was unanimous. By noon, the family that had thought to discard Derek was in complete disarray. Marilyn's attorney had withdrawn from her case after discovering she had withheld critical information. Nate faced potential criminal charges for fraud and was already receiving calls from his parole officer. Preston had been fired and publicly humiliated. Whitney was the only one not directly impacted yet, but her academic career hung in limbo after her impulsive withdrawal from college. Derek returned to the Sloan residence that afternoon, accompanied by security personnel and movers. Using the court order granting him continued access, he systematically removed his personal belongings and key items of significant value. Artwork he had collected, family heirlooms from his side, and important documents. Marilyn arrived home during this process, her composure finally breaking at the sight of movers carrying out items. "You're stripping the house now," she cried. "Isn't the public humiliation enough?" Derek looked at his wife of 20 years without emotion. "This is just property, Marilyn. You were willing to take everything from me, my company, my home, my relationship with my children. Property is the least of what you tried to steal. I wanted out of a loveless marriage," she protested. "You wanted out with everything I built," Derek corrected. "There's a difference. You could have asked for a divorce honestly, but you chose conspiracy instead." As Derek supervised the removal of his possessions, Whitney arrived home from an appointment with her college advisor. Her eyes were red from crying. "They won't let me re-enroll for this semester," she said to no one in particular. "I'm going to lose my scholarship." Derek paused, feeling a momentary twinge of paternal concern that he quickly suppressed. "Consider it part of your education," he said. "Loyalty matters. Choices have consequences." By evening, Derek had reclaimed his key possessions and returned to his suite at the Westin. There, his team briefed him on the day's developments. Mouse had uncovered evidence that Nate was already contacting another wealthy woman, a divorcee who had recently inherited a construction supply company. Ray's contacts reported that Nate had made inquiries about selling his condo quickly. "He's planning to run," Boomer concluded. Derek nodded. "Let him try." First thing Friday morning, Derek received word that Nate had indeed attempted to leave town on a red-eye flight to Miami, only to be detained at the airport by officers responding to an anonymous tip about potential flight from prosecution. At the courthouse, Judge Briggs had scheduled an emergency hearing based on the new filings. Marilyn appeared without legal representation, having been unable to secure new counsel on short notice. Her normally perfect appearance was disheveled, her eyes haunted. "Mrs. Sloan, are you representing yourself today?" Judge Briggs asked. "Temporarily, Your Honor," Marilyn replied. "I'm in the process of securing new counsel." "Perhaps that's wise, given the serious nature of these allegations," the judge noted, reviewing the latest filings. "These text messages are particularly troubling." The hearing proceeded with Sylvia methodically presenting the new evidence, while Marilyn struggled to mount any effective defense. "Your Honor," Marilyn finally said, desperation evident in her voice, "I admit to the affair, but these allegations of conspiracy are exaggerated. I was unhappy in my marriage, and Nate Lawson took advantage of that vulnerability." Derek watched impassively as his wife attempted to distance herself from Nate and reframe herself as a victim rather than a co-conspirator. Judge Briggs was unmoved. "Mrs. Sloan, the evidence suggests your involvement was knowing and deliberate. The court takes a very dim view of attempts to use divorce proceedings as a means to defraud a spouse of business interests." The judge issued updated temporary orders. Derek would have exclusive use of the marital residence. All joint accounts would remain frozen, and Marilyn would be required to provide a full accounting of all communications regarding Coastal Heights or any of Derek's business interests. As Marilyn left the courtroom, she approached Derek one last time. "Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to live on?" "You still have your car," Derek replied coldly, "and the credit cards in your name alone. Figure out, Marilyn. You were planning a life without me. Now you've got it." That afternoon, Whitney and Preston appeared at Derek's hotel suite, both visibly distressed. "Dad, this has gone too far," Preston said, trying to sound authoritative despite his shaken appearance. "Mom's staying at a hotel because she has nowhere else to go. Nate's probably going to jail. My career is destroyed. Our actions have consequences," Whitney added, her voice small. "We get that now, but we're still your children." Derek studied them, remembering the callous way they had participated in the family meeting, the months of betrayal leading up to it. "Biology makes you my children," Derek responded evenly. "But family is about loyalty. You chose your side. I'm simply honoring your choice." "So that's it," Preston demanded. "You're just cutting us off completely? Over one mistake?" "This wasn't one mistake," Derek corrected. "This was hundreds of choices, made day after day for months. Conspiracies don't happen by accident." After they left, Derek reviewed the endgame with his team. Coastal Heights was secure. The court case was proceeding in his favor, and the family that had betrayed him was experiencing the full weight of their choices. "What happens next?" Sylvia asked. Derek looked at the evidence wall, now complete with documentation of every aspect of the betrayal and his systematic response. "Now we finish it," he said, "on my terms." Chapter 9. Ashes and Iron. 1 month after the family meeting, Derek Sloan sat in Judge Briggs's chambers for a settlement conference. The past weeks had seen a complete reversal of fortunes for everyone involved. Nate Lawson had been formally charged with fraud, violation of parole conditions, and conspiracy. He remained in custody, unable to post the substantial bail. His previous victims had come forward after the publicity, strengthening the case against him. Marilyn had been staying at progressively less expensive hotels as her personal resources dwindled. Her attempts to secure high-powered legal representation had failed as the evidence mounted. She had finally retained a pragmatic attorney who advised her to salvage what she could. Preston had been unable to find employment in construction, as word of his attempted betrayal had spread throughout the industry. His former colleagues at Coastal Heights avoided him, and his expensive lifestyle had quickly become unsustainable. Whitney had managed to negotiate a probationary return to college for the summer semester, but her scholarship remained in jeopardy. In the judge's chambers, Derek and Sylvia faced Marilyn and her new attorney, Howard Gaines. Judge Briggs got straight to the point. "I've reviewed the proposed settlement agreement submitted by Ms. Keller. Mr. Gaines, has your client considered the terms?" Gaines nodded grimly. "We have, Your Honor. While the terms are severe, Mrs. Sloan understands her position has been compromised by recent developments. The settlement terms were indeed severe. Marilyn would receive no alimony and no share of Coastal Heights construction. She would get the house and a one-time payment of $500,000, a fraction of what an ordinary divorce settlement would have provided after 20 years of marriage." "Mrs. Sloan," Judge Briggs addressed Marilyn directly, "are you entering into this agreement voluntarily? Do you understand that by doing so, you are waiving potential claims to substantially more assets?" Marilyn looked exhausted, her once perfect appearance now strained and aged. "I understand, Your Honor. I want this to be over." After Marilyn signed the agreement, Judge Briggs dismissed her and her attorney, asking Derek and Sylvia to remain. "Mr. Sloan," the judge said once they were alone, "while I recognize the evidence of conspiracy was substantial, this settlement borders on punitive." "My client has been more than fair, Your Honor," Sylvia interjected. "Given the documented conspiracy and potential criminal liability, Mrs. Sloan is fortunate to receive anything." Judge Briggs studied Derek carefully. "This isn't just about the assets, is it, Mr. Sloan?" "No, Your Honor," Derek admitted. "It's about consequences." After leaving the courthouse, Derek returned to Coastal Heights Construction. Over the past month, he had restructured the company, promoting loyal employees and implementing new security measures. Business had not only stabilized, but grown, as Derek channeled his cold fury into aggressive expansion. In his office, Veronica informed him that Preston and Whitney were waiting to see him. Derek considered refusing, but finally nodded. "Send them in." His children entered, looking diminished compared to the confident conspirators of a month ago. Whitney spoke first. "We heard Mom sign the settlement." Her voice was hesitant. "Is it true she only got the house and some cash?" "That's correct," Derek confirmed. "She made her choice." Preston seemed to struggle with conflicting emotions. "And what about us? Is there ever going to be any way back from this?" Derek regarded them dispassionately. "Back to what exactly? The family that plotted to throw me away like garbage? That family doesn't exist anymore." "We made a terrible mistake," Whitney pleaded. "We listened to Mom and Nate when we should have talked to you directly." "A mistake is forgetting an appointment," Derek corrected. "What you did was betrayal. Premeditated, coordinated betrayal." Derek opened his desk drawer and removed 2 envelopes, handing one to each of them. "These contain checks for $50,000. Consider it your inheritance delivered early. There won't be more." Preston stared at the envelope. "That's it? After everything, that's all we're worth to you?" "No," Derek replied evenly. "That's all your loyalty was worth. There's a difference." After they left, Derek stood at his office window overlooking Las Vegas. In just 1 month, he had systematically dismantled the conspiracy against him and rebuilt his life on his own terms. The family that had betrayed him had been dealt with decisively, each experiencing the consequences of their choices. That evening, Derek moved into a new penthouse he had purchased. Not the family home he could have reclaimed, but a fresh start without reminders of betrayal. As he unpacked the few personal items he had chosen to keep, his phone rang. It was Ray Domingo. "Thought you'd want to know," Ray said without preamble. "Nate Lawson accepted a plea deal today. 5 years minimum." "Good," Derek responded. And the other matter? Handled. Ray confirmed. The paper trail on that LLC has been anonymously delivered to the IRS. Preston won't see a dime of what they skimmed, and he'll be answering some very uncomfortable questions. After hanging up, Derek poured himself a whiskey and looked out over the city lights. Some might view his actions as ruthless, even cruel. But Derek Sloan had learned early in life that loyalty was the only currency that truly mattered. Those who betrayed him had made their choice, and he had simply ensured they experienced the full consequences of that choice. The family meeting had been meant to end him, to push him out of his own life and strip him of everything he had built. Instead, it had revealed the true nature of those he had trusted, allowing him to excise the cancer of betrayal completely. Derek raised his glass in a solitary toast. To consequences, he said to the empty room, his voice carrying the cold satisfaction of a man who had faced betrayal and emerged victorious. 3 months later, Derek stood on the site of Coastal Heights' newest project, a massive resort development that would cement his company's position as the premier construction firm in Nevada. The betrayal that had been meant to destroy him had instead become the catalyst for his greatest success. Occasionally, he received updates about his former family. Marilyn had been forced to sell the house, unable to maintain it on her limited funds. Preston had left Las Vegas entirely after the IRS investigation. Whitney had managed to continue her education but maintained a low profile, the social standing she had once enjoyed now tarnished by scandal. As for Nate Lawson, his conviction had led to investigations into his previous schemes, extending his sentence and ensuring he would spend the better part of a decade behind bars. Derek had not forgiven any of them. He never would. But he had rebuilt his life on his own terms, stronger and more successful than before. The family meeting that was supposed to end him had instead revealed his true strength. Not the ability to maintain relationships at any cost, but the willingness to sever them completely when betrayal made them untenable. In the end, Derek Sloan had remained true to the one principle that had guided him through life. Loyalty matters above all else, and betrayal always has its price. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Quiet Life. Nate Romero had built his life on carefully constructed normalcy. For 8 years, he'd been the IT consultant who fixed network issues for small businesses in Riverside, Oregon, a town small enough that everyone knew the weekend farmers market schedule, but large enough that newcomers didn't raise eyebrows. He'd chosen it deliberately, the way he'd chosen everything since that night in Seattle when 3 men with federal badges had offered him a choice he couldn't refuse. The dining room of their 2-story colonial smelled like Miranda's famous pot roast, the kind that made neighbors slow down when walking past their house on Arlington Street. Nate watched his wife set down the serving dish, her auburn hair catching the light from the chandelier he'd installed himself last spring. Miranda had no idea that the man she'd married, the patient, gentle father who helped with homework and coached Ella's soccer team, had once infiltrated the Volkov syndicate's encrypted networks and handed the FBI enough evidence to dismantle a criminal empire worth $300 million. 7-year-old Ella was telling them about her school day, something about a science project on volcanoes, when Nate's phone buzzed on the table. He'd never been one to check messages during dinner. It was a house rule he'd established, but something made him glance down. The screen blazed white with a single message from an unknown number. Do not react. Walk out. The pot roast turned to sawdust in his mouth. His training kicked in immediately, that old FBI instinct that had kept him alive through 3 undercover operations. He forced himself to chew, to swallow, to keep his expression neutral even as his heart rate spiked. Then he saw Ella. His daughter had gone completely still, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. Her eyes were locked on her tablet, the one she used for educational games. and even from across the table, Nate could see the white glow reflected on her face. She looked up at him, and in her brown eyes, he saw something that made his blood freeze. Fear, recognition, understanding. Ella mouthed 2 words, smile. Now, Nate's mind raced through possibilities like shuffling cards. How did Ella have a device that could receive messages? He'd configured that tablet himself, locked it down to approved apps only. Who could have bypassed his security? And why would they contact his daughter? And then Tommy said his volcano would be bigger than mine, but I told him size doesn't matter if the chemical reaction is, Dad, are you okay? Miranda was looking at him with concern. He realized he'd frozen, fork in hand. Yes, sweetie. Just remembered I forgot to send an important email. He smiled, and it felt like his face might crack. You know what? I think I left my laptop on upstairs. Miranda, would you mind if I need to pee, Ella announced suddenly, pushing back from her chair with enough force to make it scrape against the hardwood floor. Like really bad. It wasn't subtle. Ella was many things. Brilliant with computers, curious to a fault, stubborn as her mother. But subtle wasn't in her repertoire. Well, go then, Miranda said, laughing. You don't need permission. Nate stood. I'll just grab that laptop real quick. He could feel Miranda's confusion as he left the dining room. Could sense her wondering why both of them were suddenly fleeing the table. In the hallway, Ella grabbed his hand. Her small fingers were trembling. Daddy, there's a bad man, she whispered. He sent me a message. He knows about Russell. The world tilted. Russell Schwartz, his former partner at the FBI Cybercrimes Division. The only person outside the agency who knew where Nate had relocated. The only person who could have sent that warning. Bathroom, Nate whispered back. Now, they slipped into the downstairs bathroom, and Nate locked the door. He knelt down to Ella's level, his hands on her shoulders. How do you know about Russell? Ella's lip trembled, but she met his eyes. I found your old phone. The one you keep in the garage, in the toolbox under the rusty nails. I know you check it sometimes when you think we're asleep. Christ, he'd underestimated her. Again, 3 weeks ago, I figured out the password, she continued. I just wanted to see pictures of you when you were younger. But then I saw the messages. About the Volkov thing. About witness protection. About Ella. His voice came out sharper than intended. He softened it. We'll talk about the snooping later. Right now, I need you to tell me exactly what the message said. She pulled her tablet from under her shirt. It came through the game app. The Volcano one. Someone hacked it. Nate took the device. The message was still there, burning on the screen. Your daddy made a very bad man very angry. That man is in your house right now. If you wanted mommy to live, you'll do exactly what I say. Make your daddy leave the dining room. Smile like nothing is wrong. You have 30 seconds. The timestamp showed it had arrived 4 minutes ago. Beneath it, a second message. Good girl. Now stay in the bathroom. Your daddy has 5 minutes to get to the front door and walk outside. Alone. If he doesn't, your mommy dies. If he tells her anything, your mommy dies. If he calls the police, your mommy dies. The gun is already pointed at her head. Nate's vision tunneled. Every cell in his body screamed to run back to the dining room. But his training held him still. Panic got people killed. Panic was the enemy. He had 4 minutes. Ella, listen to me very carefully. He kept his voice steady. Stay here. Lock the door after I leave. No matter what you hear, you stay here until I come get you. Do you understand? But mommy, I will handle this. I promise you. I will keep her safe. But I need you to be brave and trust me. Can you do that? Ella nodded, tears streaming down her face. Nate kissed her forehead, unlocked the bathroom door, and stepped into the hallway. He could hear Miranda humming in the dining room, clearing plates. She had no idea that somewhere in their home, someone was watching her through a scope. He had 3 minutes. The front door seemed miles away. Each step felt like walking through concrete. His mind cycled through scenarios. Where would a shooter position himself to have line of sight on Miranda in the dining room? The living room had a clear angle. So did the kitchen, the stairway landing. Too many options. He could rush the dining room, try to pull Miranda down, and no. If the shooter was professional, Miranda would be dead before Nate crossed the threshold. If this was Hugo Herring, and who else could it be? then the men he hired weren't amateurs. 2 minutes. Nate's hand touched the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at him not to open it, not to leave his wife vulnerable. But Ella's face flashed through his mind, and he knew he had no choice. He opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The October evening was cool, the street quiet except for the distant sound of the Hendersons' dog barking. Nate's sedan sat in the driveway, Miranda's SUV beside it. Normal. Everything looked so goddamn normal. Walk to the sidewalk, a voice said. Nate spun. A man emerged from behind the oak tree in their front yard, tall, wiry, with a tactical earpiece and a gun held casually at his side. Not pointed at Nate. Not yet. Nice and slow, the man continued. He had an accent, Eastern European. My colleague inside is getting impatient, and you don't want her to twitch when she's got that rifle on your pretty wife. Her. Nate filed that away. What do you want? The man smiled. Walk to the sidewalk, Mr. Romero. Or should I say, Special Agent Romero? Oh wait, you're not FBI anymore, are you? You took their deal. New name, new life. Too bad you couldn't keep your nose clean. Nate walked to the sidewalk, mind racing. If there was a sniper on Miranda, it meant they wanted him alive. Otherwise, they would have just killed them all. That gave him leverage. The man followed, keeping 6 feet of distance. Professional spacing, close enough to shoot accurately, far enough to react if Nate rushed him. A car is going to arrive in 30 seconds, the man said. You're going to get in it. You're going to go see someone who's been waiting a very long time to meet you. Hugo Herring. The man's smile widened. He'll be so pleased you remembered. A black SUV turned onto Arlington Street, moving slowly. Too slowly. Deliberately. Here's what happens next, the man continued. You get in that car without fuss. We drive away. Once we're 10 miles outside town, my colleague will leave your house. Your wife will never know she had a rifle pointed at her skull while she washed dishes. Your daughter stays quiet in that bathroom like a good little girl. Everyone lives. Simple. And then you and Mr. Herring have a conversation about consequences. The SUV pulled up to the curb. Tinted windows. No plates visible from the front. Nate had perhaps 3 seconds to make a choice. Get in the car and hope he could outthink Hugo Herring. Or make a move now and gamble with Miranda's life. The rear door of the SUV opened. Nate got in. Chapter 2. The Ghost. The SUV smelled like leather cleaner and gun oil. 2 men sat in the front. The driver and a passenger who kept his hand rested on something in his lap. Another gun, undoubtedly. The man from the yard climbed in beside Nate, pulling the door shut with a solid thunk. Hands on your knees, the man ordered. I'm going to search you now. If you fight, Dennis here will call our girl at your house, and we'll see how fast she can pull that trigger. Nate complied. The search was thorough, professional. They took his phone, his wallet, even his watch. When they were satisfied, the SUV pulled away from the curb. Through the tinted windows, Nate watched his house recede into the distance. Somewhere in there, Miranda was probably wondering where he'd gone. Ella was locked in the bathroom, terrified, and a woman with a rifle was watching them both. How'd you find me? Nate asked. The man beside him, Dennis, apparently chuckled. You really want to know? Or are you just stalling? Genuine curiosity. Your daughter. Nate's stomach dropped. Not directly, Dennis continued, seeming to enjoy this. But kids these days, they can't help themselves. 3 months ago, your little Ella joined an online game community. Used her real first name, mentioned she lived in Oregon. Started chatting with another girl, someone who said she was 9 and loved science too. Nate closed his eyes. He'd taught Ella about online safety, but he'd configured that tablet for educational apps only. How had she? The volcano game, Dennis said, reading his expression. It has a chat feature. Your parental controls didn't catch it because it's buried in the settings. Only activates if the kid wins 3 achievements. Ella's smart. She won 5. The other girl wasn't 9. Geneva's 28, actually. Good with kids, though. Patient. She spent weeks building trust, getting Ella to share little details. The town name eventually slipped out. From there, it was just process of elimination. How many IT consultants in Riverside have a 7-year-old daughter named Ella? Exactly 1. The SUV turned onto the highway, heading south. Away from town. away from any help Russell might be able to send, if Russell even knew what was happening yet. You used my daughter as bait. We used your daughter as a search engine, Dennis corrected. The bait was you caring more about your family than yourself. Hugo said you would. He studied you for years, you know. Read every report, every case file. He knows you better than you know yourself. Nate forced himself to breathe slowly. Panic was the enemy. Fear was the enemy. He needed to think. Hugo's brother died in prison, he said. Alexei Volkov, shanked to the throat in the yard, 3 years into his sentence. You've done your homework. Hugo blamed me. You gave the FBI the encryption keys to Alexei's entire operation. You testified at his trial. You're the reason Hugo's brother spent his last days in a 6x8 cell, pissing in a metal toilet and eating food that barely qualified as edible. Dennis's voice hardened. Yeah, Hugo blames you. The SUV exited the highway, turning onto a rural road Nate didn't recognize. Trees pressed close on both sides, their branches forming a tunnel of shadows. They were heading into the national forest, he realized. Thousands of acres of wilderness where a body might never be found. How long have you worked for Hugo? Since I was 19. 22 years now. Dennis pulled a cigarette from his pocket, but didn't light it, just rolled it between his fingers. Hugo saved my life. Gave me purpose. Family. Everything. Family. Nate kept his voice neutral. Is Geneva your wife? Dennis smiled. Sister, actually. We're a tight operation. Hugo doesn't trust easily, but when he does, it's blood deep. The SUV slowed, turning onto a dirt road barely visible through the underbrush. Branches scraped against the windows. They drove for another 10 minutes, deeper into the forest, until they reached a clearing. In the center stood a cabin, old, weathered, but maintained. Solar panels on a roof. A generator humming somewhere out of sight. This wasn't some abandoned shack. This was a planned location. The SUV stopped. Dennis opened the door and gestured with his gun. Out. Nate climbed out, his legs stiff from the drive. The air was cold, smelling of pine and earth. No houses visible in any direction. No sounds except the wind and the distant cry of a bird. The cabin door opened, and a man stepped onto the porch. Hugo Herring looked nothing like his brother. Where Alexei had been broad and brutal, Hugo was lean and refined. He wore an expensive suit, his silver hair swept back, his face weathered but distinguished. He could have been a banker, a lawyer, a professor. He looked civilized, but Nate had seen the files. He knew what Hugo had done to the people who'd crossed his brother. Knew about the accountant who'd skimmed money and been found in 12 separate locations. Knew about the girlfriend who'd gone to the police and simply vanished, never to be found. Hugo Herring was a monster in a nice suit. Nate Romero, Hugo said, his voice smooth. Though I knew you as Nathan Rodriguez when you infiltrated my brother's organization. Different name, same face. You're older now. Softer. Fatherhood suits you. Let my family go. This is between us. Hugo descended the porch steps slowly, deliberately. You're not in a position to make demands. But I appreciate the sentiment. Shows you still have spine, even after 8 years of playing house. He stopped 5 feet away, studying Nate like a specimen under glass. Do you know what it's like to watch your brother die alone? Hugo asked quietly. To get a phone call from a prison chaplain telling you that Alexei bled out on concrete, surrounded by strangers who cheered? They cheered, Nate, because you made him into a symbol, the big bad criminal brought down by the clever FBI. Your brother was a criminal. He destroyed lives. My brother, with a businessman operating in a market society, refuses to acknowledge. But I'm not here to debate morality. Hugo's expression hardened. I'm here for payment. What do you want? Hugo smiled, and it was worse than any anger could have been. I want you to understand what you took from me. So I'm going to take everything from you. But first, we're going to have a conversation. He gestured toward the cabin. Inside, I prepared something special. Dennis prodded Nate forward with the gun. They climbed the porch steps and entered the cabin. The interior was surprisingly sophisticated. Computer equipment lined one wall, monitors, servers, enough processing power for serious operations. A table in the center held a laptop, open and running. On the screen was a video feed. Nate's dining room. Miranda was sitting at the table, looking at her phone with a concerned expression. She kept glancing toward the hallway, clearly wondering where Nate and Ella had gone. Live feed, Hugo said. Geneva is in your attic. She's been there for 3 days, actually. Came in through the access panel in your garage while you were at work. Very patient, my Geneva. Very professional. Nate's hands clenched. 3 days. This woman had been in his house for 3 days, watching his family, waiting. Here's what's going to happen, Hugo continued, moving to stand beside the laptop. You're going to answer my questions honestly. Completely. Every lie, every evasion, I'll know. And every time you lie, I'll have Geneva hurt your wife. Nothing fatal. Just pain. A broken finger, perhaps. A cut. Enough to teach you the value of truth. You're insane. I'm motivated. There's a difference. Hugo pulled up a chair, sitting down across from Nate. Now, let's begin. Question 1. Do you have any regrets about what you did to my brother? Nate met his eyes. No. Hugo's expression didn't change. Honest. Good. That would have been a disappointing lie. He typed something on a laptop. On the screen, Miranda stood up, walking toward the hallway. She's going to check on Ella, Hugo observed. Motherly instinct. Geneva will let her knock on the bathroom door. Let Ella say she's fine. We're not monsters, Nate. We're not going to traumatize a child unnecessarily. You already traumatized her by sending those messages. A necessary evil. Now, question 2. During your time undercover in the Volkov Syndicate, did you develop any feelings of loyalty or friendship toward the people you were betraying? The question surprised Nate. He'd expected threats, demands for information. Not this psychological excavation. Some of them were just kids, he admitted. Runners, low-level dealers who didn't have other options. I felt sorry for them. But you testified anyway. They broke the law. Even the 17-year-old, Marcus Petrov, the one who went to juvenile detention and hanged himself 3 months later. Nate's jaw tightened. He remembered Marcus, a scared kid who'd been recruited by Alexei's lieutenants, promised money and protection. A kid who'd seen Nate as a mentor. Marcus made his own choices. As did you. Hugo leaned back. Tell me, does Miranda know? About your real past? No. Does she know that the man she married is a lie? That Nathan Rodriguez doesn't exist? That you built your entire relationship on deception? I built it on love. Love and lies. Interesting combination. Hugo typed again. On screen, Miranda returned to the dining room, but now she was on her phone, calling someone. She's calling you. Your phone is obviously here with us, so it'll go to voicemail. She's starting to worry. Nate watched his wife's face crease with concern. The guilt was a physical thing, sitting in his chest like a stone. Question 3, Hugo continued. If you could go back, knowing what you know now, knowing about Marcus, about Alexei's death, about the lives ruined by your investigation, would you still do it? This was the real question, Nate realized. This was what Hugo needed to hear. Yes. Hugo's eyes flashed. Even knowing it would end like this? With you in this cabin, your wife in danger, your daughter terrified? Yes. Because your brother and his organization destroyed hundreds of lives. They trafficked drugs that killed teenagers. They ran protection rackets that bankrupted honest businesses. Enough. Hugo held up a hand. I've heard the FBI's propaganda. I wanted your truth. He stood, pacing to the window. Outside, darkness was falling, the forest becoming a wall of shadows. Here's my truth, Nate. My brother raised me. Our parents died when I was 12, and Alexei was 19. He could have put me in foster care, taken his freedom, lived his life. Instead, he worked 3 jobs to keep us together. He taught me to read, to fight, to survive. Everything I am, I owe to him. Hugo turned back. So, when you took him from me, you took my whole world. And now I'm going to take yours. By killing me. Oh no, death is too simple. Hugo smiled that terrible smile again. I'm going to dismantle your life piece by piece, starting with the truth. He nodded to Dennis, who pulled out a phone and dialed. After a moment, he put on speaker. Hello. It was Miranda's voice, anxious and confused. Mrs. Romero, Hugo said pleasantly. My name is Hugo Herring. I'm sitting here with your husband, and we need to have a conversation about who he really is. Chapter 3. The Truth Unravels. Who is this? Miranda's voice came through the speaker, sharp with confusion and rising fear. Where's Nate? What? Your husband is safe, Hugo interrupted smoothly. For now. And he'll remain safe as long as you listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Nate lunged forward, but Dennis was ready. The gun barrel pressed against his temple, cold and uncompromising. Don't, Hugo said mildly, not even looking at Nate. Miranda, are you sitting down? I'm calling the police. The woman in your attic will kill you before you finish dialing. She's 3 feet above your head right now, looking at you through a thermal scope. You're wearing a blue sweater, you're in the dining room, and you just set your phone on the table to put me on speaker. Am I correct? The silence stretched out. Then, small and frightened, yes. Good. Now, go get your daughter from the bathroom. Bring her to the dining room. I promise you, we won't hurt either of you if you cooperate. Nate's mind raced, searching for options, finding none. The gun was still against his head. Hugo had thought of everything. On the laptop screen, they watched Miranda walk to the hallway with shaking steps. She knocked on the bathroom door. Ella? Sweetie, it's okay. You can come out now. The door opened. Ella's face was blotchy from crying, but she wasn't hysterical. She held her mother's hand as they walked back to the dining room. Excellent, Hugo said. Now, Miranda, I'm going to tell you about your husband. The real story. And Nate here is going to confirm everything I say, because if he doesn't, my colleague will put a bullet through your kitchen window. It won't kill you. She's too good a shot for that, but it will hurt tremendously. Do we understand each other? Yes. Miranda's voice was barely a whisper. Hugo began. He told her about Nathan Rodriguez, the FBI special agent recruited straight out of MIT's computer science program. Told her about the 3-year undercover operation in the Volkov syndicate. Told her about the testimony that had sent 47 people to prison. Told her about the witness protection deal, the new identity, the deliberate deception. With each revelation, Nate watched Miranda's face on the screen. Watched confusion turn to disbelief. Disbelief to dawning horror. Nate, she said when Hugo paused. Tell me this isn't true. The gun pressed harder against his temple. It's true, Nate said quietly. All of it. Miranda's face crumbled. You lied to me. For 8 years, we met at that coffee shop. You said you were new in town, that you just moved for work. Was any of it real? My feelings for you are real. Are real. Miranda, I love you. You built our entire marriage on a lie. Her voice broke. Did the FBI tell you to marry me? Was I part of the cover story? No. God, no. Meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. You and Ella. You're everything. Don't you dare bring Ella into this, Miranda hissed. Don't you dare use our daughter too, did she know? Is that why she was acting strange? Hugo interjected smoothly. Your daughter discovered the truth recently. She's quite intelligent, breaks into password-protected phones when she's curious. You should be proud. Mommy, Ella's small voice. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Sure, baby. This isn't your fault. Miranda pulled Ella close, and Nate could see his wife's hands trembling. None of this is your fault. Touching, Hugo said. But we're not finished. You see, Miranda, your husband isn't just a liar. He's also the reason a 17-year-old boy named Marcus Petrov committed suicide. He's the reason 53 children lost their parents to the prison system. He's the reason my brother died, bleeding on concrete. Your brother was a criminal, Nate said, unable to stay silent. My brother was family. Hugo's composure cracked for the first time. And you took him from me with your self-righteous crusade. You didn't just arrest criminals, Nate. You destroyed lives, families. And you did it all while pretending to be one of us, earning our trust, sharing our meals. He turned back to the phone. So here's what's going to happen, Miranda. You're going to listen to your husband confess every detail of what he did, every lie he told, every person he betrayed. And when he's done, you're going to understand exactly who you married. For the next hour, Hugo extracted the story from Nate like pulling teeth. Every question was designed to wound, to expose, to shame. He made Nate describe the friendships he'd formed while undercover, the trust he'd earned and betrayed. made him recount the look on Alexei's face when the FBI burst into that warehouse, when Alexei realized that his trusted computer specialist was the one who'd sold them out. Through it all, Miranda said nothing, just held Ella and listened. Question 17, Hugo continued, consulting notes on his laptop. The night you proposed to Miranda, you just come from a meeting with your FBI handler. Correct. Yes. You've been authorized to deepen your cover by entering a serious relationship. The FBI psychologist had cleared you for potential marriage and children, as long as you maintained operational security. That's not why I proposed. I proposed because I loved her. But you had permission, official sanction for your deception. It wasn't. Nate stopped, seeing the trap. Anything he said would sound like justification. Yes, I had permission. On the screen, Miranda flinched. Hugo smiled. You see, Miranda, your entire life has been a CIA operation. Every birthday, every anniversary, every moment you thought was real, all of it approved by bureaucrats in Washington. FBI, not CIA, Nate said. Does it matter? Hugo shot back. The point is, she was never your wife. She was your assignment's collateral damage. That's not true. Then tell her. Hugo gestured to the laptop. Tell her the truth about why you really married her. Tell her about the panic attack you had after proposing, the one Russell Schwartz talked you down from. Tell her how you almost backed out. Nate closed his eyes. Russell had sworn that conversation was confidential. How did Hugo know? We've had a long time to investigate you, Hugo said, reading his thoughts. Russell wasn't as careful with his reports as he should have been. The FBI has leaks, same as any organization. And we paid very well for information about you. He turned back to the phone. Miranda, your husband nearly ran away the night before your wedding. He had a bag packed, a plane ticket to Canada. He was going to disappear because he couldn't stand the guilt of lying to you. Nate? Miranda's voice was barely audible. I didn't run, Nate said desperately. I stayed. I married you because I couldn't imagine my life without you. But you thought about it. You almost left me at the altar. I was scared. I'd never been so scared in my life because I was about to make the most important decision I'd ever make, and I couldn't tell you the whole truth. But I stayed, Miranda. I chose you. You chose the lie. The words hit like a physical blow. Hugo was watching Nate's face with satisfaction. There it is. The moment she understands. Beautiful, isn't it? The death of trust. Dennis's phone buzzed. He checked it, then whispered something to Hugo. Hugo's expression changed, became calculating. It seems we have a complication. Russell Schwartz has been trying to reach you, Nate. When you didn't answer, he got nervous. He just called the Riverside Police Department to request a welfare check on your house. Nate's heart leapt. Russell knew something was wrong. Geneva, Hugo said into the phone. Police will arrive in approximately 12 minutes. You need to be gone in 10. Make it clean. Wait. Miranda's voice was panicked. You said you wouldn't hurt us if we cooperated. I lied, Hugo said simply. But I'm not going to kill you. Geneva will leave your house, and you'll be safe. For now, the police will find nothing wrong, and you'll tell them everything is fine. Because if you don't, if you say even one word about me or this phone call, I'll come back. And next time, I won't be so merciful. Mommy, I'm scared, Ella whimpered. I know, baby. I know. Miranda's voice was shaking, but there was steel underneath. We're going to be okay. On the screen, they could see movement in the ceiling, insulation shifting, a panel moving. Geneva was extracting herself from the attic. One more thing, Hugo said. Miranda, I want you to think very carefully about what you've learned tonight. About who your husband really is. About the lies he's told. And I want you to ask yourself, can you ever forgive him? He ended the call. The cabin fell silent except for the hum of the computer equipment. Through the window, full darkness had arrived, the forest invisible beyond the glass. That was the first payment, Hugo said quietly. Your wife knows the truth. Your marriage is destroyed. Now we move to the second phase. What do you want from me? Nate asked. Everything. Hugo pulled up a new screen on the laptop. Files, directories, terabytes of data. You're going to help me rebuild my brother's empire. You're going to use your FBI knowledge to create an unbreakable network. And you're going to do it willingly, because if you don't, I'll kill everyone you've ever cared about. Miranda, Ella, Russell, even your former colleagues at the FBI. I'll never help you. You will, because I'm not giving you a choice. Hugo nodded to Dennis. Take him to the basement. Let him think about his priorities. Dennis hauled Nate out of the chair, gun still pressed to his spine. They descended a narrow staircase into a concrete room, cold, bare, with a single chair bolted to the floor. Sit, Dennis ordered. As Nate sat, Dennis pulled zip ties from his pocket, securing Nate's wrists to the chair arms. When he was satisfied, he stepped back. Hugo's going to break you, Dennis said conversationally. It's what he does. He's very good at it. I've seen him work on men tougher than you. They all break eventually. I'm not like them. That's what they all say. Dennis headed for the stairs. Get comfortable. You're going to be here a while. The door closed. The lock clicked. Nate was alone in the darkness, with nothing but his thoughts and the knowledge that somewhere 8 miles away, his wife and daughter were trying to process the wreckage of their lives. He'd underestimated Hugo Herring. Thought the man would want simple revenge, a bullet and a shallow grave. But this was so much worse. Hugo wasn't going to kill him. He was going to hollow him out, use him, make him complicit in the very thing he'd spent his career fighting. Unless Nate could find a way to turn the tables. He started working on the zip ties, feeling for any weakness in the plastic. His wrists were already chafing, but he ignored the pain. Because Nathan Rodriguez, had been in tight spots before, had faced down worse odds, and he'd survived by being smarter, faster, more ruthless than his enemies expected. Hugo Herring was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Chapter 4, The Setup. Nate spent the first 3 hours methodically testing every inch of his restraints. The zip ties were professional grade, tight enough to cut off circulation if he pulled too hard, loose enough to keep him conscious. The chair was solid steel, bolted into the concrete with heavy anchors. No obvious weaknesses, but Nate hadn't survived 3 years undercover by giving up easy. The basement was roughly 15 by 15 feet, concrete floor and walls, a single bare bulb overhead controlled by a switch at the top of the stairs. No windows. One door. The air smelled of damp earth and something chemical, bleach, maybe, or industrial cleaner. His FBI training kicked in, cataloging details. The concrete walls were new, no more than a year old. Someone had poured this foundation recently, which meant this cabin wasn't just a hideout. It was purpose-built. Hugo had been planning this for a long time. Around 2 a.m., the door opened. Dennis descended with a bottle of water and a protein bar. Dinner, he said, holding the water to Nate's lips. Nate drank. The water was lukewarm, but clean. His tactical mind noted that Hugo wanted him functional, not desperate. That gave him leverage. You know this won't work, Nate said. Even if I help him build his network, the FBI will eventually find out. They monitor me. Dennis laughed. You really think the FBI gives a shit about you anymore? You were useful 8 years ago. Now you're just a liability on their books. Russell checks in once a year. Maybe. That's it. It was true, and Nate knew it. Witness protection worked by abandonment. Give people new identities and then forget about them. The FBI had bigger problems than one former agent living in Oregon. Hugo's been watching you for 3 years, Dennis continued. Learned your patterns, your contacts, your life. You're alone, Romero. No backup coming. No cavalry. Just you, us, and the choices you make. He left the protein bar on the floor, just out of reach. A small cruelty. When Dennis returned upstairs, Nate went back to work. The zip ties were secured through a metal loop welded to the chair arm. Standard interrogation setup. But the welding wasn't perfect. Nate could feel a rough edge where the metal had cooled unevenly. It would take hours, maybe days, but if he could saw the plastic against that edge. He started working, slow and methodical. By dawn, his wrists were bleeding, but he'd made progress. The zip tie on his right hand was fraying, the plastic fibers starting to separate. Another few hours, maybe less. The door opened again. This time, it was Hugo, immaculate despite the early hour, carrying a laptop. Good morning, he said pleasantly, as if they were old friends meeting for coffee. I trust you've been thinking about my offer. Go to hell. Defiant. I respect that. Hugo set the laptop on a folding table he'd brought down. But defiance without strategy is just noise. So let me show you something that might clarify your priorities. He turned the laptop screen toward Nate. It was a video feed of Miranda's bedroom. The angle suggested a camera hidden in the smoke detector. High quality, clear audio. Miranda was packing a suitcase, moving with jerky, angry motions. Ella sat on the bed, watching. She's leaving you, Hugo observed. Can't really blame her. 8 years of lies is a lot to process. Nate's jaw clenched. You said you'd leave them alone. I said I wouldn't kill them. I never said I'd stop watching. Hugo pulled up another window, traffic camera footage. She's planning to drive to her sister's house in Portland. Shannon Hickman, married to a lawyer, 2 kids. Miranda thinks she'll be safe there. He minimized the window. But here's the thing, Nate. I don't want to hurt your family. I want to use them. Leverage is only effective if the hostage stays alive. So here's my revised offer. You work for me, build what I need, and I guarantee Miranda and Ella's safety. They'll never even know they're being protected. Or you refuse, and I'll make their lives a living hell. Not through violence. That's crude. Through exposure. What do you mean? Hugo's smile was reptilian. I have 8 years of surveillance on you. Every corner you cut, every time you broke your witness protection protocols. Remember that trip to Seattle 2 years ago? The one you told Miranda was a work conference? You actually went to meet Russell because you were worried about a leak in the FBI's Oregon field office. Nate's blood ran cold. Or how about the time you hacked into the Riverside police database to check if they had any connections to organized crime? Illegal search, no warrant. Or the cash you've been slowly moving into offshore accounts, just in case you need a run? All documented, all ready to be sent to the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility. They won't care. I'm not active anymore. Maybe, but they will care about the perjury. You testified under oath that you had no contact with criminal elements after entering protection. But you've been monitoring the remnants of the Volkov syndicate for years, haven't you? Checking to make sure none of Alexei's people got released, tracking their movements. That's a legal contact, Nate. That's a violation of your protection agreement. Hugo had done his homework. Every word was accurate. If the FBI revokes your protection, your real identity becomes public record. And then every enemy you made over the past 15 years will know exactly where to find you. How long do you think Miranda and Ella would survive? It was a perfect trap. Cooperate and betray everything he believed in, or refuse and watch his family be destroyed. I need time to think. No, you don't. You need time to pretend you have a choice. Hugo closed the laptop. But I'm a reasonable man. I'll give you 12 hours. At 6 p.m. tonight, you'll give me your answer. Yes, and you start building my network. No, and I make one phone call that ruins your life. He headed for the stairs, then paused. Oh, and Nate, your little trick with the zip tie and the welding burr? Impressive. Dennis noticed about an hour ago. We've been watching through the camera in the corner. Nate's eyes found it. A small lens, almost invisible against the dark concrete. But please, keep trying, Hugo continued. It's entertaining, and it keeps you distracted from the real problem. You've already lost. You just haven't accepted it yet. The door closed. The lock clicked. Nate stared at the camera, then at his bloody wrists, then at the zip ties that he now knew would never break in time. Hugo was right about one thing. Defiance without strategy was just noise. So Nate needed a strategy. He closed his eyes and let his mind work the way it had during his undercover days, not in straight lines, but in angles and misdirection. Hugo thought he had all the leverage, thought he'd planned for everything. But every plan had vulnerabilities. Every careful scheme had one moment where it could be flipped. Nate just had to find it. He started with what he knew. Hugo wanted a network built. That meant time, weeks, or months of work. He couldn't kill Nate until it was finished. That was leverage point 1. Dennis and Geneva were loyal, but they were also human. Humans made mistakes, got complacent. That was leverage point 2. Russell was out there, worried enough to call for a welfare check. He might be Nate's only ally, but he was a good one. Former Marine, excellent tactical mind, stubborn as hell. That was leverage point 3. And then there was the biggest vulnerability of all, Hugo's rage. Men driven by revenge, made emotional decisions. Hugo had stayed cold so far, but that was a performance. Underneath, he was burning, and fire could be manipulated if you knew which way the wind was blowing. Nate opened his eyes and looked at the camera. "I want to make a deal," he said clearly. Nothing happened for a moment. Then the door opened. Hugo descended, eyebrow raised. "Your 12 hours aren't up. I don't need them. I'll build your network." Hugo's eyes narrowed. "That was easier than expected. You were right. I don't have a choice. But I have conditions. You're not in a position to—" "Hear me out." Nate met his gaze. "You want an unbreakable system. That takes trust. If I'm working under constant threat, I'll make mistakes. Or worse, I'll sabotage it in ways you won't catch until it's too late. I'm very good at subtle sabotage, Hugo. I did it to your brother for 3 years." Hugo's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "So here's my offer. I build your network complete and functional. In exchange, you guarantee Miranda and Ella's safety. Real safety, not just surveillance. And when it's done, you let me go. Fake my death if you want. But you let me disappear, and you never contact my family again. Why would I agree to that? Because I'll build you something better than you imagined. Not just a network, a fortress. Encrypted protocols the FBI can't crack. Routing systems that make the old Volkov syndicate look like child's play. I'll give you my absolute best work. And I'm supposed to trust that? No, you're supposed to verify it. Have your own tech people review every line of code. Test it against federal systems. I'll prove it works before you let me go." Hugo studied him for a long moment. "You're planning something?" "Of course I am. I'm planning to save my family and get out alive. But I'm also planning to give you what you want. Because the alternative, you exposing me, destroying Miranda, making Ella grow up knowing her father is in prison, that's worse than working for you." It was a calculated play. Hugo needed to believe that Nate was beaten but rational, desperate enough to cooperate but proud enough to demand terms. Hugo smiled slowly. "You're good. I'll give you that. You almost sound sincere." "I am sincere. About saving my family." "All right. I'll accept your terms, with one addition. Miranda and Ella stay under surveillance. Not in their house. I'll pull Geneva out. But I'll have eyes on them at Shannon's place in Portland. If you try anything, if I even suspect you're sabotaging the work, I'll know immediately." "Agreed." Hugo extended his hand. After a moment, Nate would have shaken it if his wrists weren't zip-tied to a chair. Hugo laughed. "Right, Dennis." Dennis appeared, cutting the zip ties with a knife. Blood rushed back into Nate's hands, painful and necessary. "Welcome to the team," Hugo said. "Let's go upstairs and get started." Nate stood on shaking legs, rubbing his wrists. He followed Hugo up the stairs, his mind already 3 steps ahead. Because Nate had lied, not about building the network. He would do that, make it look perfect. But while he built Hugo's fortress, he'd be building something else entirely. A trap, the kind that would take weeks to set up, require perfect timing, and depend on Hugo's arrogance blinding him to the danger. It was exactly the kind of plan that had brought down the Volkov syndicate. And it would work again. Chapter 5, The Double Game. The cabin's upper level had been converted into a tech hub that would make any hacker jealous. 6 monitors arranged in a semicircle, 3 high-end servers humming in a climate-controlled rack, enough bandwidth to suggest Hugo had run fiber optic cable out here somehow. Dennis unlocked a laptop and placed it in front of Nate. "This is your workstation," Hugo explained. "Air gap from the main network until I verify your work. You'll build the architecture here, test it in the sandbox environment, and when it's ready, we'll port it to the production systems." Nate booted up the laptop. Professional setup, Linux distribution, development tools already installed, clean file system. Someone who knew their way around cybersecurity had configured this. Geneva did the setup, Hugo said, reading his expression. "She has a master's in computer science from MIT. Graduated 2 years before you did." Another surprise. Hugo's team wasn't just muscle. They were educated, skilled, dangerous in ways Nate was still discovering. "What's the scope?" Nate asked, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Hugo pulled up a chair. "I want a communication network that can be traced. Routing protocols that bounce through enough jurisdictions that even the FBI's cyber division can't track it. Encryption that makes Signal look like a child's toy. And I want it modular, able to expand to 1,000 users without compromising security. That's ambitious. I have ambitious plans. My brother's empire was regional, mostly West Coast operations. I'm thinking global. Dark web marketplaces, cryptocurrency exchanges, information brokering. All of it untraceable back to me. Nate's fingers started moving across the keyboard, opening terminal windows, pulling up architecture diagrams. His mind was working on two levels. The surface level where he designed what Hugo wanted, and the deeper level where he planned the hidden vulnerabilities. How long? Hugo asked. 3 weeks for the core architecture. Another 2 to test and refine. 5 weeks total if nothing goes wrong. You have 4. Nate nodded, already designing the first layers. He'd learned a crucial lesson during his undercover work. The best way to hide a trap was to build something genuinely excellent around it. Hugo's tech people would review his work, looking for obvious sabotage. They wouldn't find any, because Nate wasn't going to sabotage the network. He was going to make it so secure, so perfect, that Hugo would trust it completely. And then, when the time was right, Nate would use that trust to destroy him. The first 3 days passed in a blur of code and coffee. Hugo let him work mostly undisturbed, checking in twice a day to review progress. Dennis brought meals, always professional, always armed. Geneva appeared once, a quiet woman in her late 20s with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She reviewed Nate's encryption protocols, suggested improvements, even complimented his work. "You're better than I expected," she said. "The FBI Cyber Division was lucky to have you." "Thanks. Hugo says you're motivated by family." "That's good. Loyalty is important." She paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I hope this works out. I have nothing against you personally, but you'd kill me if Hugo ordered it." Without hesitation, she said it the way someone might comment on the weather. "It's not personal. It's operational." After she left, Nate stared at the code on his screen. These people, Hugo, Dennis, Geneva, they weren't cartoon villains. They were professionals with their own moral frameworks, their own loyalties. In another life, he might have worked alongside them. In this life, he was going to help bring them down. On the 4th night, Dennis brought him a phone. "Your wife wants to talk to you." Nate's heart jumped. He took the phone with shaking hands. "Miranda, don't." Her voice was cold. "Don't say my name like that. Like we're still, like things are normal. I know they're not. I know I don't care what you know. I'm calling because Ella won't stop asking about you. She thinks you're dead. She cries herself to sleep every night." The words hit like punches. "Can I talk to her?" "No, because I don't know what to tell her. How do I explain that her father is a liar? That everything she knew about our family was fake? Not everything. My love for you, for her, that was always real." "Stop." Miranda's voice cracked. "I can't do this. I can't listen to you try to make this okay. It's not okay. It will never be okay. I'm trying to fix this. I'm trying to." By working for a criminal? Shannon told me about the man watching our house. About the car that follows us to the grocery store. You think I don't know we're prisoners? Nate closed his eyes. 4 weeks. Give me 4 weeks, and I'll end this. Ow! I can't tell you. You have to trust me. Miranda laughed, bitter and broken. Trust you? After everything? I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. Please, Miranda. 4 weeks. The silence stretched out. Then, Ella wants to know if you're coming home. Tell her yes. Tell her Daddy has to finish something important, but then I'm coming home. Don't make promises you can't keep. I've never broken a promise to her. I'm not starting now. Another pause. 4 weeks, Nate. Then I'm taking Ella somewhere you'll never find us. Somewhere Hugo Herring will never find us. And you'll let us go. Do you understand? Yes. Good. The line went dead. Nate handed the phone back to Dennis, who'd been listening the whole time. That sounded rough, Dennis said, almost sympathetically. Just let me work. For the next 2 weeks, Nate barely slept. He built the network layer by layer, each component perfect, each protocol tested and retested. And buried deep in the code, invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly where to look, he built his trap. It wasn't obvious. It was elegant. The network used a distributed architecture, hundreds of nodes bouncing traffic through a web of proxies. Standard dark web stuff, designed so that even if law enforcement found one node, they couldn't trace back to the source. But Nate added something special, a master key. It was hidden in the routing protocols, disguised as random variants in the ping times. To anyone analyzing the network, it looked like ordinary internet latency. But if you knew the pattern, a specific sequence of connection requests from a specific set of IP addresses, the network would log its own traffic. Every transaction, every message, every user, all of it time-stamped, geotagged, and stored in an encrypted file that would automatically upload to a dead-drop server the moment the master key was triggered. It was the same technique Nate had used to bring down the Volkov syndicate. And Hugo had no idea it was even possible. On day 18, Geneva reviewed the completed architecture. "It's beautiful," she said, genuine admiration in her voice. The encryption layers alone would take the NSA months to crack. And the routing system, I've never seen anything this sophisticated. Will it pass muster? Hugo's bringing in an outside consultant. Former FSB, one of the best. If she signs off, we go live. The consultant arrived 2 days later. A woman in her 50s named Katrina Cooper, with cold eyes and a reputation for finding exploits in supposedly secure systems. She spent 3 days tearing apart Nate's work, looking for backdoors, vulnerabilities, hidden protocols. She found nothing, because there was nothing to find. The trap Nate had built wasn't a backdoor. It was a feature that looked like a bug that looked like random chance. "It's clean," Katrina announced on the 3rd day. "More than clean. This is world-class work. If this were legal, you could sell it for millions." Hugo was watching Nate carefully, looking for any sign of deception. Nate kept his face neutral, tired, resigned. "Then we're ready?" Hugo asked. "One more test," Katrina said. "Let me try to trace a transaction through the system in real time. If I can't track it, nobody can." They ran the test. Katrina used tools Nate had only read about in classified briefings. Traffic analysis software developed by intelligence agencies, AI-powered pattern recognition, even quantum computing simulations. Nothing worked. The network was a ghost. "Congratulations," Katrina said to Nate. "You've built something truly untraceable." Hugo smiled. "Excellent. We'll go live tomorrow." That night, alone in the bedroom Hugo had given him, Nate used the small window of unsupervised computer access to send a message. It went through 7 proxy servers, encrypted with a cipher only one person would recognize. Russell Schwartz's phone buzzed at 3 a.m. with a single text from an unknown number. "Cabin. Forest. Route 34. 4 weeks. Come heavy." The message deleted itself 30 seconds after delivery. Russell, 300 miles away in Portland, stared at his phone for a long moment. Then he started making calls. Chapter 6, The Revelation. The network went live on day 23. Hugo had already lined up clients. Dark web marketplaces hungry for secure communication, cryptocurrency traders paranoid about surveillance, even a few former Volkov syndicate members who'd survived the FBI raids and wanted back in the game. Nate watched the user count climb, 50, then 100, then 200. Each transaction logged, each message captured, all of it invisible to everyone except him. "You should be proud," Hugo said, standing behind Nate's chair as the monitors displayed network traffic. "You've built something that will last decades." "I built a prison for myself." "No, you built freedom. For me, for my organization, for everyone who wants to operate outside government control." Hugo's hand landed on Nate's shoulder, heavy and possessive. "And when this is all running smoothly, I'll keep my word. You can disappear, start over. Maybe rebuild things with Miranda. She won't take me back. Then you'll find someone else. You're still young, still talented. You could have a good life, Nate. All you have to do is accept what you've become. A traitor. A criminal. Everything he'd fought against. When do I get to leave?" "Soon. Let the network stabilize. Make sure there are no teething problems. Another week, maybe 2. Too long." Russell needed more time to gather resources, plan an assault. But Nate couldn't stall without raising suspicion. "I want to see my daughter. Before I go." Hugo considered. "1 meeting. Supervised. I'll arrange it." 2 days later, Dennis drove Nate into Portland. The meet was set at a public park. Hugo's idea of safety through exposure. Geneva would be positioned nearby with a rifle. Any sign of law enforcement, and she'd start shooting into the crowd. Hugo knew Nate wouldn't risk civilian casualties. Ella was sitting on a swing. When Nate arrived, Miranda standing guard beside her. His daughter looked smaller than he remembered, her face pale and drawn. Miranda looked worse. Dark circles under her eyes, weight loss, the kind of exhaustion that came from weeks of fear. 20 minutes, Dennis said, staying by the car. And remember, we're watching. Nate walked to the swing set. Ella saw him and froze, then launched herself off the swing and ran. He caught her, lifting her up, feeling her small arms lock around his neck. Daddy, I was so scared. I know, baby. I know. I'm here now. Miranda watched with an expression Nate couldn't read. When he finally set Ella down, his daughter looked up at him with questions in her eyes. Are you still doing the bad thing? For the bad man. Trust a 7-year-old to cut through complexity. Yes, he admitted, but not for much longer. Daddy has a plan. Can you tell me? No, because you're smarter than I am, and if you know the plan, you might try to help. And I need you to stay safe. Ella processed this with the seriousness of a child who'd been forced to grow up too fast. Okay, but you have to promise you'll come back. I promise. Miranda spoke for the first time. Don't make promises you can't keep. I've never broken a promise to her. I won't start now. You broke every promise to me. Miranda's voice was controlled, but Nate could hear the rage underneath. In sickness and health, for better or worse, to love and honor. You broke them all the day you lied about who you were. I know. That's it. Just I know. You don't get to. She stopped, glancing at Ella. We shouldn't do this here. Then when, after this is over, will you give me a chance to explain? Explain what? How you built our entire life on a foundation of lies. How you used me as cover for your witness protection. There's nothing to explain, Nate. I understand perfectly. You don't understand everything. Then tell me. Right now, tell me the one thing that makes this okay. Nate looked at his daughter, then back at Miranda. The night I proposed, I almost ran. Hugo was right about that. I had a bag packed, a ticket to Vancouver. I was going to disappear because the guilt was eating me alive. And I thought about you. About the way you laughed at my terrible jokes. The way you fell asleep reading on the couch. The way you made the world make sense. And I realized that everything I'd done, the undercover work, the testimony, all of it, I'd done because I believed in justice, in right and wrong. But loving you is the first time I'd done something just because it felt right. Not because it was tactical or strategic, just because you made me want to be better. Miranda's eyes were wet. That doesn't fix the lies. No, it doesn't. But means they weren't all lies. The man who married you, who held Ella for the first time, who built that tree house in the backyard, even though I had no idea what I was doing. He was real. He is real. That's me, Miranda. The rest was just context. Context that you hid from me. Yes. For 8 years. Yes. She turned away, wiping her eyes. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I should even try. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance. When this is over, when Hugo is dealt with and we're safe, I'm asking for one conversation. Just you and me. And if you still want to leave after that, I'll let you go. I'll sign whatever papers you want, give you whatever you need. But please, give me that one chance. Miranda was quiet for a long time. Finally, she nodded. One chance. But Nate, if you die doing whatever stupid thing you're planning, I will never forgive you. Do you understand? Ella needs your father. Even a lying, secretive, impossible father is better than a dead one. I understand. Dennis called out. Time's up. Nate knelt down, hugging Ella one more time. Be good for your mom. Do your homework. Don't hack into any more password-protected devices. Ella giggled through her tears. I'll try. He stood, looked at Miranda one last time, and walked back to the car. As Dennis drove away, Nate watched his family shrink in the rearview mirror. Miranda had her arms around Ella, both of them watching the car leave. Touching, Dennis said. Almost makes me feel bad about what happens next. Nate's attention snapped forward. What happens next? Hugo didn't tell you? We're expanding operations. The network's been so successful that we're bringing in some of Alexei's old partners. The ones who got out before the FBI raids. They're flying in tomorrow for a strategy session. At the cabin? Where else? Hugo wants to show off your handiwork. Prove that the Herring organization is the future. This was it. The moment Nate had been waiting for. Not just Hugo and his core team, but multiple high-value targets in one location. If Russell was ready, if the plan worked, they could take down a significant chunk of the criminal network in one move. But it also meant more security, more guards, more ways for things to go wrong. When they got back to the cabin, Nate found Hugo in the tech room, reviewing user analytics. You met with your family, Hugo said without looking up. How was it? Painful. Good. Pain is clarifying. Hugo pulled up a new screen. These are our guests for tomorrow. I want you to meet them, show them the network, explain how it works. Think of it as a sales presentation. Nate scanned the names. Most were familiar from his FBI days, mid-level players who'd avoided prosecution by being careful or lucky. But one name stood out. Elias Mann. Alexei Volkov's chief financial officer, the man who'd managed the money flows, covered the tracks, made the empire run. He'd disappeared the day before the FBI raids, vanished so completely that even Nate's investigation couldn't find him. Elias is coming here. He's been in Argentina for 8 years. But he wants back in the game, and he has capital to invest. Hugo smiled. Between his money and my ambition, we're going to build something bigger than my brother ever imagined. Nate kept his expression neutral. Sound impressive. It will be. And you made it possible. Hugo stood, clapping Nate on the shoulder. After tomorrow, once the partnership is formalized, you're free to go. I'll stage your death, car accident, probably, and you can disappear. Start over. Just like that. Just like that. You built what I needed. You kept your word. I'll keep mine. It sounded too easy. Hugo wasn't sentimental, but he also wasn't stupid. Would he really let Nate walk away with all this knowledge? No, he wouldn't. Which meant tomorrow was the end game for both of them. That night, Nate used his brief computer access to send one final message to Russell. Tomorrow. Noon. 8 targets. Armed. Come ready. Then he deleted every trace of the message and prepared for war. Chapter 7. The Convergence. The morning arrived with fog rolling through the forest, thick enough that Nate could barely see the tree line from the cabin windows. Perfect conditions for an assault. Russell would appreciate that. Hugo had transformed the cabin's main room into a conference space. 8 chairs around a long table, presentation screen at one end. Coffee service set up like this was a legitimate business meeting. The absurdity would have been funny if the stakes weren't so high. The guests started arriving at 10 a.m. Elias Mann came first, stepping out of a Mercedes SUV with 2 bodyguards flanking him. He was older than his photos suggested, silver-haired and distinguished, wearing an Italian suit that probably cost more than Nate's car. Nothing about him suggested criminal. He looked like a banker, which was exactly what he'd been for the Volkov syndicate. Nathan, Elias said, extending his hand. Or should I call you Nate now? I must say, I never expected to see you working for Hugo. Life takes strange turns. It does. No hard feelings about the testimony, I hope. You were just doing your job. I respect that. The ease with which he said it was chilling. 8 years ago, Nate's testimony had helped dismantle Elias's entire operation. And now here he was, smiling like they were old colleagues. The others arrived in clusters. Nate recognized 4 of them from FBI briefings. Mid-level operators who'd specialized in money laundering, identity fraud, weapons trafficking. The last 2 were new faces, probably recruited from Elias's Argentina operation. By 11:30, everyone was assembled. Hugo stood at the head of the table, confidence radiating from him. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. What I'm about to show you will revolutionize how we operate. No more worrying about FBI surveillance. No more paranoia about encrypted communications being cracked. Nate Romero has built us something unprecedented. All eyes turned to Nate. He felt the weight of their attention, the calculation behind their smiles. These were men who'd built careers on ruthlessness and paranoia. They wouldn't trust easily. Show them, Hugo said. Nate pulled up the network interface on the presentation screen. This is a distributed communication network using military-grade encryption and quantum-resistant algorithms. Every message is fragmented, encrypted at the source, routed through a minimum of 50 proxy servers across 30 countries, and reassembled only at the destination. He walked them through the architecture, explaining the security features, demonstrating the impossibility of tracing traffic. Geneva had set up a live demonstration. 2 users in different countries exchanging messages that appeared as random noise to anyone monitoring the network. The FBI can't crack this, Elias asked. They could, given unlimited time and resources, but by the time they decrypt one message, the routing protocols have already shifted. It's like trying to catch smoke. And the cost? Minimal. The infrastructure is already built. You just pay for access. Hugo can discuss the terms. Elias leaned back, impressed. This is exactly what we need. With this kind of security, we could coordinate operations across continents. No more isolation. No more working in cells. This is a force multiplier. The others nodded agreement. Hugo was glowing with satisfaction. Then we have a deal? Hugo asked. We have the framework of a deal, Elias corrected. But I'd like my technical people to review the system. Standard due diligence. Of course. Geneva can. The lights went out. For a moment, everyone sat in darkness. Then emergency generators kicked in, bathing the room in dim red emergency lighting. What the hell? Dennis was on his feet, gun out. Hugo's expression had gone cold. Geneva, report. Geneva's voice came through on the radio. Someone cut the main power line. I'm repositioning to. Gunfire erupted outside. Not wild spray and pray, but controlled 3-round bursts. Professional shooting. Contact. Geneva's voice was sharp. Multiple hostiles, approaching from the north. I count 5. No, 7. Shit, they're flanking. More gunfire. Then silence. Geneva. Dennis was already moving toward the door. Everyone stay calm, Hugo commanded. Dennis, take 2 men and secure the perimeter. Elias, get your bodyguards positioned. This might be law enforcement, might be a rival crew. Either way, we're not getting caught. But Nate knew the truth. This was Russell. The question was whether Russell had brought enough people to make this work. More gunfire outside, closer now. Someone was screaming. Through the window, Nate saw muzzle flashes in the fog, short, controlled bursts from the north and west. Russell had brought at least 2 teams, maybe more. Hugo grabbed Nate, pulling him close. Did you do this? Did you call them? I've been under surveillance 24/7. When would I have called anyone? It was technically true. The messages had been sent days ago. Hugo shoved him away. If this is the FBI, that network of yours just became evidence. You better pray it's not. But it wasn't the FBI. Russell had retired 5 years ago, but he still had connections. Former military operators, private security contractors, men who owed him favors. Men who'd come when he called, no questions asked. The cabin door burst open. Dennis stumbled in, blood streaming from shoulder wound. They're everywhere, he gasped. Professional team, military-grade equipment. They took out Geneva, disabled the vehicles. We're pinned. Elias was already moving toward the back of the cabin. Is there another exit? Root cellar, Hugo said. This way. They moved as a group, Hugo leading, Elias's bodyguards bringing up the rear. But Nate hung back, watching the chaos unfold. Through the window, he saw figures moving through the fog. Tactical gear, suppressed weapons, perfect coordination. Russell had brought his A-team. One of the figures looked up at the window. Even through the fog, Nate recognized him. Russell Schwartz, older and grayer than 8 years ago, but still moving like the Marine he'd once been. He saw Nate, gave a tiny nod, and signaled to his team. They were breaching the cabin. Nate had seconds to decide. Follow Hugo and the others into the root cellar. Try to maintain his cover, or break away now. Trust Russell to handle it? Romero. Hugo was at the cellar entrance. Move! A flashbang exploded through the front window. The world went white and silent. When Nate's vision cleared, Russell's team was inside, moving with precision. 4 men, all armed with assault rifles, clearing the room with professional efficiency. Russell pointed at Nate. Down. On the floor now. Nate dropped, hands behind his head. Play the captive. The team secured the main room in seconds, then moved toward the cellar entrance. But Hugo had already disappeared below, dragging Elias and the others with him. Russell knelt beside Nate, keeping his rifle trained on the cellar entrance. "You okay?" "Yeah. Hugo's got 8 people down there, all armed. It's going to be a bloodbath if you breach." "Not planning to breach. We got something better." He pulled a remote detonator from his vest. "When you sent me the location, I had 3 days to prep. We wired the cellar with enough gas to put everyone to sleep for 6 hours. Non-lethal, mostly. You might want to hold your breath." He pressed the button. A soft hiss echoed from below. Then shouting. Then coughing. Then silence. "Give it 90 seconds, Russell said. They waited. The fog outside was starting to clear, revealing the bodies of Hugo's security team scattered around the perimeter. Russell's people had been brutally efficient. After 2 minutes, Russell's team descended into the cellar, gas masks on. They emerged dragging unconscious bodies. Hugo, Elias, Dennis, all the others. Zip-tied and neutralized. "Is it done?" Nate asked. "Not even close." Russell pulled him to his feet. "We've got Hugo and his crew, but the network is still running. You need to trigger that master key you built in. Log everything. Give us the evidence we need to round up the users." Nate moved to the laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. The sequence was complex, disguised in the normal network traffic patterns. But he designed it, and he knew exactly where to press. The master key activated. Across the world, in 30 countries, the network began logging its own traffic. Every message, every transaction, every user, all of it captured and uploaded to the dead drop server Russell's FBI contacts would access. "How many users?" Russell asked. "Last count was 400 and change. You're looking at the entire dark web criminal network for the Western Hemisphere." Russell whistled. "The FBI is going to throw you a parade. The FBI thinks I'm in witness protection in Oregon." "Yeah, about that." Russell pulled out his phone, showing Nate a message. "I called in some favors. Your protection status is being reinstated, full security clearance restored. And there's a job offer waiting for you. Cybercrimes Division, senior analyst position. If you want it." Nate looked at the unconscious form of Hugo Herring, zip-tied and helpless on the floor. 8 years of planning, months of rage and revenge, all ended in 90 seconds of sleeping gas. What about the others? The people Hugo brought in, already being rounded up. We've got teams coordinating with Interpol, FBI, local agencies. By tomorrow morning, every person who used that network will be in custody or on the run. It was over. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. The FBI descended on the cabin like locusts, trucks full of evidence technicians, cyber specialists, even a mobile command center that's set up in the clearing. Hugo and his crew were transported to a federal holding facility in Portland, each one facing charges that would put them away for life. Nate spent 16 hours being debriefed. Every detail of the past 4 weeks, every conversation with Hugo, every line of code in the network. The assistant director of cybercrimes personally thanked him for the biggest dark web takedown in FBI history. 463 arrests, she said, showing him the tally on her tablet. Money launderers, arms dealers, drug traffickers, human smugglers. You just cleared our case backlog for the next 3 years. I just built a network, Nate said. You build a trap. There's a difference. She offered him the job Russell had mentioned. Senior analyst, full benefits, relocation assistance if he wanted to move back to D.C. A chance to return to the work he'd left behind 8 years ago. Nate said he'd think about it. What he really needed was to see his family. Miranda was still in Portland, staying at her sister's house. Shannon Hickman had been briefed by FBI agents, understood enough to know that Nate wasn't the villain she'd assumed. But understanding didn't mean forgiving. When Nate knocked on Shannon's door, it was Ella who answered. She looked at him for a moment, then launched herself into his arms. You came back. You promised, and you came back. I'll always come back for you, sweetheart. Always. Miranda appeared in the hallway, Shannon behind her. His wife looked exhausted, wary, but she wasn't running. Can we talk? Nate asked. Miranda nodded. Shannon, can you take Ella to the park? Of course. Come on, kiddo. Let's go feed the ducks. When they were alone, Miranda led him to the living room. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, a distance that felt like miles. The FBI told me what you did, Miranda said. About the network, the trap, all of it. They said you helped take down hundreds of criminals. I had help. They also said you risked your life. That if Hugo had figured out what you were doing, he would have killed you. Probably. And you did it anyway. Her eyes were red. Why? Why couldn't you just run? Take us somewhere safe and let someone else deal with Hugo. Because running wouldn't have stopped him. He'd have found us eventually. And because Nate stopped, choosing his words carefully. Because 8 years ago, I made a choice to fight for something bigger than myself. I brought down the Volkov Syndicate because it was the right thing to do, even though it meant hiding who I was. And I couldn't stop being that person just because it was inconvenient. Even if it cost you your family, I was trying to save my family. You and Ella, you're everything to me. But I also couldn't let Hugo rebuild what his brother started. Too many people would have gotten hurt. Miranda was quiet for a long time. I want to hate you for the lies, the secrets, the danger you brought into our lives. I want to pack Ella up and disappear, start fresh somewhere you can't find us. You should. You'd be better off. Don't tell me what I should do. There was fire in her voice now. You don't get to make decisions for me. Not anymore. You're right. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. I don't want apologies, Nate. I want the truth. All of it. No more secrets. No more classified information you can't share. If there's any chance of fixing this, I need to know everything. So Nate told her. He started at the beginning with his recruitment into the FBI straight out of MIT. Told her about his first undercover assignment, the fear and adrenaline, the way he'd learned to become someone else. Told her about the Volkov Syndicate, about Alexei and the empire he'd built, about the 3 years Nate had spent living a lie. He told her about Marcus Petrov, the 17-year-old who'd hanged himself in juvenile detention, about the nightmares Nate still had sometimes, the faces of people he'd helped put away, about the guilt that never quite faded. And he told her about meeting her, about the coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday, about the way she'd laughed when he'd spilled his drink trying to ask for her number, about falling in love so completely that it terrified him. I should have told you before we got married, he said. I know that, but I was scared you'd run. Scared I'd lose the one real thing in my life. So you lied instead. Yes, and I'm sorry. I'll be sorry for the rest of my life. But I can't change it, Miranda. All I can do is promise that from now on, there are no more secrets. No more lies. Just me, exactly as I am, for better or worse. Miranda wiped her eyes. The FBI offered you a job. How did you? Shannon's husband is a lawyer. He made some calls, found out what was happening. They want you in D.C., working cybercrimes. I turned it down. Miranda looked surprised. Why? Because I'm done choosing the job over everything else. If you'll let me, I want to come back. Not to D.C., not to some new life. Back to Riverside, back to our house, back to being Ella's dad and your husband. I'll find work. Regular work, nothing classified. IT consulting, network security, whatever keeps us stable. And if Hugo's people come after you, they won't. Hugo's looking at life without parole, same as Elias and the others. Their organization is finished. The FBI seized all their assets, froze all their accounts. They're done. You can't guarantee that. No, but I can promise I'll never put you and Ella in danger again. If there's even a hint of trouble, we'll have FBI protection, relocation, whatever it takes. Miranda stood, pacing to the window. Outside, Shannon was pushing Ella on a swing, both of them laughing. Normal. Safe. Everything Nate wanted to give them. I need time, Miranda said finally, to process this, to figure out if I can trust you again. It's not something I can decide in one conversation. I understand, but I'm not saying no. I'm saying I need to see who you are now. The real you, not Nathan Rodriguez or Nate Romero, but whoever you actually are underneath all the identities. I don't know if I know anymore. Then we'll figure it out together. Maybe. She turned to face him. One condition, family therapy. All three of us. We're not doing this alone. Agreed. And you tell Ella the truth. Age-appropriate truth, but she deserves to know who her father really is. I'll tell her. Miranda crossed him, stopping just out of reach. This doesn't mean we're okay. It doesn't mean I've forgiven you. but it means I'm willing to try. Nate stood. That's more than I deserve. A lot more. But she was almost smiling. Don't make me regret it. Chapter 9. The New Foundation. 6 months later, Nate stood in the backyard of their riverside house, watching Ella demonstrate her science fair project for the judges. She'd built a working model of a quantum computer, ridiculously advanced for a 7-year-old, but that was Ella. Miranda stood beside him, her hand in his, both of them beaming with pride. The past half year had been hard. Therapy sessions where they dug into the wreckage of trust, long conversations about who they wanted to be moving forward, moments of doubt when it seemed easier to just give up. But they kept at it. Nate had taken a job with a legitimate cybersecurity firm in Portland, consulting for businesses that needed network protection. The work was honest, legal, and boring in the best possible way. He came home every night by 6, helped with homework, coached Ella's soccer team. Hugo Herring was serving life without parole in a supermax facility in Colorado. Dennis in Geneva had taken plea deals, testifying against the others in exchange for reduced sentences. Elias Mann had fled to Argentina, but was caught trying to board a plane to Paraguay. The entire organization had been dismantled. Russell visited once a month, usually bringing his daughter to play with Ella. He'd retired for good this time, bought a fishing boat, talked about writing a memoir. He and Nate never discussed the cabin, the assault, the night. Everything changed. They didn't need to. She's going to win, Miranda said, squeezing Nate's hand. Probably. She's terrifying. She gets it from you. I'm choosing to take that as a compliment. Miranda laughed, and the sound was like sunlight. They found their way back to laughter, to trust, to something that felt like the beginning of forgiveness. Ella's presentation ended to enthusiastic applause. She ran over, practically vibrating with excitement. They said my quantum theory was remarkably sophisticated for my age bracket, and Mr. Henderson said he'd never seen a 7-year-old explain Heisenberg's uncertainty principle so clearly. That's amazing, sweetheart, Nate said, lifting her up. I'm so proud of you. Are we still getting ice cream after? Double scoop. You earned it. As they walked to the car, Nate felt Miranda's hand slip back into his. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. That night, after Ella was asleep and the house was quiet, Nate and Miranda sat on the back porch, watching stars emerge through the Oregon clouds. I've been thinking, Miranda said, about what the therapist said, about building new memories to replace the old ones. Yeah, I think we should take a trip, all 3 of us, somewhere we've never been together. Make new memories that belong to all of us, not to Nathan Rodriguez or Nate Romero, but to our family. Where would you want to go? Anywhere. Everywhere. Ella's obsessed with volcanoes right now. Maybe Hawaii? We could see the lava flows, go to the observatory, let her geek out about geological formations. Nate smiled. That sounds perfect. It does, doesn't it? Miranda leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm not saying everything's fixed. There's still days when I remember the lies, and I get angry all over again. But there are also days when I look at you and see the man I fell in love with. And those days are starting to outnumber the angry ones. I'll take it. You better. Because I'm not going through this again. This is it, Nate. One more lie, one more secret, and we're done. I mean it. I know. No more lies. No more secrets. Just us. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Inside, Ella's nightlight glowed softly in her window. The house was quiet, safe, normal. Everything Nate had fought for. The next morning, a package arrived. No return address, just Nate's name in neat handwriting. Inside was a single item, a prepaid phone with one message already loaded. You did good work on that network. If you ever want to come back to the field, call this number. The world needs people like you. AD, the assistant director of cybercrimes, offering him another chance at the life he'd left behind. Nate looked at the phone for a long moment, thought about the